The massive python's coils tightened around Bull's chest, each desperate breath becoming shallower than the last. Jack Thompson froze at the edge of the murky waterhole, his canteen slipping from his fingers and hitting the cracked earth with a hollow thud. This wasn't just any Brahmin. It was Bull, the last living link to everything he'd lost. Martha's voice crackled over the radio. "Jack, the board's voting today. We're losing the preserve." But her words barely registered as the python's jaws inched closer to Bull's massive silver head. The old bull's eyes, once fierce and proud, now bulged with primal terror, locking onto Jack's with unmistakable recognition. Blood swirled in the muddy water. Behind him, the tall grass rustled with something much larger than wind. Golden eyes appeared in the shadows as a lion pride emerged, watching. How could he save Bull when death circled from every direction? Leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments along with the city you're watching from now. Let's continue with the story. Willow Creek Nature Preserve sprawled across 5,000 acres of southern Texas, a patchwork of drought-stricken grasslands punctuated by occasional watering holes that grew more precious by the day. 3 months without significant rainfall had transformed lush pastures into brittle golden expanses that crunched underfoot. The preserve, once the pride of the county, now faced closure within 30 days, unless a financial miracle materialized. Jack Thompson hadn't always been a ranger. At 38, the lines around his eyes told stories of both laughter and loss. 5 years earlier, he'd been a third-generation cattle rancher until the flood that took everything: his farm, his wife Sarah, and their unborn child. Only Bull had survived, swimming desperately alongside Jack as the waters rose. Now, with calloused hands and a quiet determination, Jack patrolled the preserve that had become his second chance at purpose. Bull stood out among the preserve's residents, a magnificent 7-year-old Brahmin with a distinctive silver-gray coat that caught the morning light. His massive hump rose like a mountain above powerful shoulders, and his curved horns stretched 3 feet across. Most visitors mistook his impressive stature for aggression, but Jack knew better. Those intelligent brown eyes held a gentleness that belied his 1,000-pound frame. The scar along his left flank told a darker story. 3 years of abuse at Frank Weston's ranch before Jack had intervened. "You're burning daylight, son," called Martha Sullivan from the main office porch. At 78, with silver hair always perfectly pinned and boots more weathered than Jack's, Martha volunteered 5 days a week. The former ranch owner had lost her husband a decade ago but found family among the preserve's staff. "Robert's meeting with the board again. Numbers don't look good." Emma Mitchell, the preserve's veterinarian, emerged from her clinic with her medical bag. At 34, she'd fought twice as hard as her male colleagues for half the respect. "That new bull we rescued is running a fever," she said, brushing a strand of auburn hair from her face. "Third exotic animal abandonment this month. Someone's dumping them deliberately." Robert Carson, the preserve administrator, watched from his office window. 62 and perpetually worried, he'd spent 20 years balancing budgets and passion. Today, his expression carried the weight of imminent failure. What none of them knew was that Frank Weston, Bull's former owner, sat in that board meeting. At 70, wealth had hardened rather than softened his ambitions. The silver-haired rancher had political connections, a developer's vision for luxury homes where animals now roamed, and a particular grudge against the bull that had escaped his control, and the ranger who had facilitated that escape. As Jack radioed in his patrol route that morning, the sun beating down on his worn Stetson, he couldn't have known how these disparate threads would violently intertwine before the day's end. Jack's boots kicked up dust as he made his morning rounds through the eastern section of Willow Creek. The drought had transformed familiar terrain into an alien landscape. Creek beds lay exposed like bones, and the few remaining watering holes had become crowded oases for desperate wildlife. He adjusted his hat against the merciless Texas sun, already blazing though it wasn't yet 9. His radio crackled. "Jack, it's Robert. Board meeting started early. Frank Weston showed up with some suits from Austin. Don't like the look of it." "Copy that," Jack replied, a familiar knot forming in his stomach. Frank's sudden interest in preserve business never boded well. As he navigated a dry ravine, Jack's mind drifted back 3 years to the night that changed everything, the night he'd found Bull. The anonymous tip had led him to Frank Weston's back 40, where he discovered the young Brahmin chained in a too-small pen, ribs protruding, festering wounds on his flanks from repeated beatings. The official report cited neglect and improper care, but Jack knew better. He'd seen the gleam in Frank's eyes when he claimed the bull was just being broken. It wasn't about training, it was about breaking a spirit. The legal battle that followed nearly cost Jack his new career. Frank's connections ran deep, but justice prevailed, barely. The court awarded custody of the bull to the preserve, and Jack had watched Bull transform from a terrified, aggressive animal into the dignified creature that now called Willow Creek home. What made it all the more meaningful was what Jack discovered later. The distinctive marking on Bull's right ear matched the breeding records from his family's lost farm. Bull wasn't just any rescued animal. He was the last living connection to the Thompson family legacy, born on their land before being sold off after the flood. A distant bellow interrupted Jack's reminiscence, unusual for this time of day. He quickened his pace, following the sound toward one of the few remaining water holes. As he crested the small rise, the scene below stopped him cold. In the murky water, Bull thrashed weakly, his massive body partially submerged. Wrapped around his chest and neck were the thick, muscular coils of an enormous python, an animal that had no business being in Texas. The snake, at least 15 feet long with distinctive markings, had already established its death grip. Bull's eyes rolled white with terror, his breathing labored as the python tightened with each exhale. "Jesus Christ," Jack whispered, unslinging his rifle before thinking better of it. A shot might kill the snake, but could just as easily hit Bull. Instead, he grabbed his radio. "Emma, emergency at the east water hole. Bull's being attacked by a python, not native. Looks like a reticulated. Need assistance in the stun kit now." The radio crackled with Emma's voice. "A python? That's the 3rd exotic this month. On my way. Don't engage alone." But Jack knew Bull didn't have 20 minutes. The python's coils were already restricting the bull's breathing. Each desperate attempt to inhale resulted in a tighter squeeze. The snake's triangular head watched with cold efficiency, waiting for its prey to weaken enough for the final strike. As Jack calculated his approach, his radio crackled again. This time it was Martha. "Jack, you need to know, the funding vote isn't going well. Robert says Frank's convincing the board the preserve is a liability. Says we can't even keep our animals safe." The timing was too convenient. Jack scanned the area with new suspicion. The python, the board meeting, Frank's sudden appearance. It felt orchestrated. But proving that would have to wait. Bull's eyes had found him, recognition and desperation clear, even at this distance. Jack removed his utility belt, keeping only his knife and the small emergency stun device designed to temporarily incapacitate aggressive animals. Slowly he entered the water, wincing at the warm, stagnant feel against his legs. "Easy, boy," he called softly, making his presence known to Bull while assessing the python's position. The massive snake had wrapped itself twice around Bull's midsection and once around his neck, using the water to support its weight while it squeezed. Jack would need to target its head to have any chance of loosening that grip. Bull made a sound somewhere between a groan and a whimper. a sound Jack had never heard from the proud animal before. It tore at something deep in his chest. This wasn't just any animal. This was the bull that had somehow found its way back to him after the flood, the last living thing that had shared his old life. As Jack inched closer, he became aware of movement in the tall grass beyond the waterhole. Tawny shapes shifted in the shadows, watching with predatory intensity. Lions, at least 3 of them, had gathered, attracted by the commotion and the prospect of an easy meal. Their presence added a deadly new dimension to an already desperate situation. Jack took a deep breath and committed to his course. If he retreated now, Bull would certainly die. If he continued, they both might. The choice, when framed that way, wasn't really a choice at all. "Hold on, old friend," he murmured, closing the final distance between them. The python sensed his approach, its cold eyes swiveling to track this new potential threat. Jack raised the stun device, knowing he'd get only one chance before the snake might redirect its attack toward him. And the device was designed for mammals. He had no idea if it would work on a reptile, but it was Bull's only hope. With a prayer muttered under his breath, Jack pressed the device against the snake's head and triggered it. The python convulsed violently, its coils reflexively tightening before momentarily slackening in confusion. In that brief window, Jack grabbed behind its head with one hand and pulled at the coil around Bull's neck with the other. Bull found new strength in this reprieve, thrashing with renewed vigor. The python, recovering quickly, tried to re-establish its grip. For several harrowing minutes, man and bull fought against the serpent's incredible strength. Jack's muscles screamed with the effort of keeping the snake's head away from both himself and Bull while trying to unwind its massive body. Just when Jack's strength began to fail, he heard splashing behind him. Emma appeared at his side, medical kit slung over her shoulder, a catch-pole in her hands. "The head," Jack gasped. "Control the head!" Together, they managed to loop the catch-pole around the python's neck, giving Jack leverage to unwind more of its coils. Bull, sensing freedom was close, gave a mighty heave that finally dislodged the snake's grip enough for Jack to pull the last coil free. The python, realizing its meal was escaping, tried to retreat, but Emma maintained her hold. "We need to secure it," she said, professional despite her heavy breathing. "This isn't a wild animal. Someone released it. It's evidence." As they wrestled the massive reptile toward shore, Bull collapsed in the shallow water, his breathing ragged, blood seeping from puncture wounds where the python's teeth had gripped. His once proud form looked suddenly diminished, vulnerable in a way Jack had never seen before. Emma quickly assessed the injured bull while Jack secured the python in a transport crate she had brought. "These punctures are deep and there's crushing damage to his ribs," she reported grimly. "He needs antibiotics immediately. And look at these marks on his flank. Those aren't from today." Jack examined the fresh wounds she indicated, thin, precise cuts that couldn't have come from the python. "Someone injured him before this attack," he said, anger building. "Someone set this up." A vehicle approached, dust billowing behind it. Martha's ancient pickup truck bounced over the uneven terrain, coming to a stop at the edge of the waterhole. The elderly woman emerged with surprising agility, medical supplies in hand. "Lord have mercy," she breathed, taking in the scene. "Is he alive?" "For now," Emma answered, already preparing an antibiotic injection. "But he's in shock, and these wounds are serious." Martha knelt beside Bull's head, her weathered hand gentle on his muzzle. "I've known a lot of animals in my 78 years, she said quietly. "Never seen one with eyes like his? He knows exactly what's happening." As if in response, Bull's gaze shifted to Jack, and in that moment, something passed between man and animal that transcended conventional understanding, recognition, trust, and something like gratitude. The moment was shattered by the sound of approaching vehicles. Robert's Jeep appeared, followed by a sleek black SUV that Jack recognized as Frank Weston's. The board meeting had apparently adjourned and come to them. "Looks like the mountain is coming to Mohammed," Martha muttered, positioning herself protectively near Bull's head. Jack rose to his feet, suddenly aware of his soaked, muddy appearance as Robert and Frank approached with 3 men in expensive suits. The lions, still watching from the tall grass, retreated slightly at the arrival of more humans. "Well, well," Frank said, his voice carrying the false concern of a practiced politician. "Seems like you've had some excitement, Thompson." "One of your charges having a bad day?" "A python attacked him," Jack replied coldly. "Reticulated python, not native to Texas. 3rd exotic animal incident this month." "Nature can be cruel," Frank said with a shrug. "Just proves my point to the board. This place is falling apart. Can't even protect your animals." One of the suited men stepped forward. "Mr. Carson has shared the preserve's financial statements. I'm afraid the numbers don't support continued county funding." "Convenient timing," Jack said, staring directly at Frank. "Python attacks right during your board meeting." Frank's expression hardened. "Are you implying something, Thompson?" Before Jack could answer, Bull let out a pained bellow as Emma extracted a foreign object from one of his wounds. She held up a small dart with a grim expression. "This wasn't just a random attack," she announced. "Someone tranquilized him first, then placed him in the water. The python was just finishing the job someone else started." All eyes turned to the dart, then to Frank, whose practiced smile never wavered. "Tragic," he said smoothly. "All the more reason this place needs professional management. Gentlemen, shall we continue our tour? I think we've seen enough here." As they retreated to their vehicles, Martha approached Jack with fire in her eyes. "That snake didn't slither 20 miles from the nearest possible habitat," she whispered. "Someone brought it here. Someone who knew Bull's routine." Jack nodded grimly. "And someone who knew exactly when the board would be voting on our funding." In the waterhole behind them, Bull struggled to his feet, swaying dangerously but refusing to remain down. Despite his injuries, the massive animal positioned himself between the humans he trusted and the retreating vehicles, as if even now his instinct was to protect. "Would you look at that?" Martha said softly. "He's still standing guard." Jack met Bull's exhausted gaze and made a silent promise. Whoever had orchestrated this attack wouldn't get away with it, not while he had breath in his body, because Bull wasn't just an animal to protect. He was family, the only family Jack had left. With Bull stabilized but still dangerously weak, Jack helped Emma establish a makeshift treatment area at the edge of the waterhole. The massive Brahman's breathing came in shallow gasps, his normally imposing frame diminished by pain and exhaustion. Each labored breath revealed the extent of the crushing damage from the python's powerful coils. "The tranquilizer explains why he couldn't fight back," Emma said, examining the dart she'd extracted. "This is a heavy-duty sedative, not something you can just pick up at a feed store. Someone with veterinary connections provided this." Jack's jaw tightened as he watched Bull struggle to remain standing despite his injuries. "Someone wanted him dead specifically. This wasn't random." Martha returned from her truck with more medical supplies and a grim expression. "Board meeting's officially adjourned. Robert just called. They voted to give us 30 days before closure unless we can secure private funding." She lowered her voice. "Frank made quite the show about safety concerns, paraded those investors around like conquering heroes. They're talking luxury homes and a golf course where our North Meadow sits." The python, now securely contained in Emma's transport crate, shifted restlessly. Jack studied the massive reptile with growing suspicion. "This is a captive-bred specimen, well-fed, perfect scale condition. Someone paid good money for this snake and then just released it here, at the exact moment Bull would be vulnerable?" "And how did they know Bull would be at this particular waterhole?" Emma added, administering another injection of antibiotics. "His routines aren't published anywhere." A horrible thought formed in Jack's mind. Unless someone's been watching, learning patterns. He scanned the surrounding grassland, suddenly feeling exposed. The lions had retreated to a respectful distance but remained visible, their tawny forms ghost-like in the shimmering heat. Martha followed his gaze. Those cats have been hanging around more often lately. Drought's pushing everything toward the remaining water sources. It's not just drought, Jack said quietly. Someone's orchestrating this. The exotic releases, the board meeting timing, this attack, it's all connected. Bull suddenly tensed, his massive head rising despite obvious pain. His nostrils flared as he caught a scent on the breeze. Jack instinctively reached for his rifle. Frank Weston's black SUV had returned, dust billowing behind it as it approached the waterhole alone. The vehicle stopped 30 yards away, and Frank emerged, his expensive boots incongruous against the cracked earth. "Thought I'd check on the patient," he called, approaching with calculated casualness. "Quite the fighter you've got there." Jack positioned himself between Frank and Bull. "Didn't realize you cared so much about animal welfare, Frank, given your history." The older man's smile never reached his eyes. "Water under the bridge, Thompson. Besides, that bull was always too stubborn for his own good. Some animals just don't know when they're beaten." Bull let out a low, threatening rumble, a sound Jack had never heard from him before. The Brahman's eyes fixed on Frank with unmistakable recognition and hostility. "Seems he remembers you," Martha observed dryly. Frank's confident facade slipped momentarily before he regained his composure. "Well, I came to offer a solution to your little funding problem. Those gentlemen who visited, they represent Horizon Development Group. They're prepared to make a very generous offer for this land, enough to relocate your animals to other facilities." "This is a county preserve," Jack said flatly. "It's not for sale." Frank's smile widened. "Actually, as of this morning's vote, the county has authorized exploration of private development options. Seems your management has raised some serious safety concerns." He gestured toward Bull. "Case in point." Emma stepped forward, the tranquilizer dart in her gloved hand. "Funny how these safety concerns keep happening right when you need them to. This dart is from a restricted veterinary supply. I'd be very interested to know how it ended up in a bull that just happened to get attacked during your board meeting." "Careful with those accusations, Dr. Mitchell," Frank warned, his friendly tone evaporating. "Slander has consequences, especially for professionals with licenses." Martha moved beside Emma. "Is that a threat, Frank Weston? Because I may be old, but my memory works just fine. I remember when you ran off the Henderson family to get their grazing rights. I remember when Parker's farm had that mysterious fire after he refused to sell." Frank's expression hardened. "You're living in the past, Martha. Times change. This preserve is finished. The drought, the budget cuts, the safety issues. You're just postponing the inevitable." A low grumble of thunder rolled across the sky, though no clouds were visible. The lions in the distance shifted nervously. "Weather Service didn't mention storms today," Martha commented, glancing skyward. Jack's radio crackled to life. "All personnel, be advised," came Robert's voice. "Flash flood warning just issued for Willow Creek watershed. Tropical depression stalled offshore has intensified. Potential for 6 to 8 inches in the next 24 hours. Begin flood protocols immediately." The timing couldn't have been worse. Bull was in no condition to be moved far, and the waterhole sat in a natural depression that would quickly fill if the rains came. Frank's confidence visibly surged. "Well, isn't that perfect timing? Nature making my point for me. This place is a liability." He turned to leave, then paused. "That offer has a 48-hour expiration, Thompson. After the flood washes through, the price drops." "Think about it." As Frank's SUV disappeared in a cloud of dust, Jack turned to Emma. We need to move Bull to higher ground before the rain starts. Emma shook her head. He's too unstable. Those crushing injuries could include internal bleeding. Moving him might kill him. And leaving him here definitely will, Jack countered, urgency rising in his voice. Martha intervened. The old maintenance shed on the north ridge, it's not far and it's on high ground. We could bring enough supplies to wait out the flood. As they debated options, Bull suddenly collapsed, his massive legs finally giving out. He hit the ground with a dull thud that sent birds scattering from nearby trees. Emma rushed to his side, her stethoscope out in seconds. "His heart rate's dropping," she reported, professionalism masking fear. "We're losing him." Jack knelt beside Bull's head, placing a hand on the animal's broad forehead. The bull's intelligent eyes found his, filled with a trust that tore at Jack's heart. "You're not dying today, old friend," he whispered fiercely. "Not after everything we've survived." A memory flashed unbidden. Bull as a younger animal, somehow finding Jack in the floodwaters that had claimed his farm and family. The massive bull swimming beside him through the churning water, both of them fighting the current together. They'd saved each other that day. "We need adrenaline," Emma called out, rummaging through her medical kit. "His system is crashing from the combination of injuries and that sedative." Martha was already running to her truck. "I keep emergency supplies in my glove compartment." Jack remained by Bull's side, speaking low words of encouragement as the animal's breathing grew more labored. "Stay with me, Bull. You're the last one. The last piece of the farm, of Sarah." His voice broke. "I can't lose you too." Whether Bull understood the words or merely responded to the emotion behind them, his eyes remained fixed on Jack's face, unwavering despite his failing strength. Martha returned with a small case containing emergency medications. Emma quickly prepared an injection and administered it directly into Bull's neck. Tense seconds passed as they waited for a response. Slowly, Bull's eyes gained focus, and his breathing steadied slightly. Emma's shoulders sagged with relief. "It's working, but it's temporary," she warned. "We still need to move him to safety before the rains come." "The maintenance utility vehicle can handle his weight if we can get him into the trailer," Jack said, already calculating logistics. "But we'll need help loading him." As if in answer to an unspoken prayer, Robert's Jeep appeared, followed by two more preserve vehicles. Robert had brought reinforcements, the remaining staff and several volunteers. "Heard you needed an ARC," Robert called grimly as he approached. "I've got everyone available. The Weather Service upgraded the warning. This is going to be bad." While the team assembled a makeshift ramp to the trailer, Jack pulled Robert aside. Frank was here. He knew about the attack before it happened. And now he's using the flood as leverage for his development deal. Robert's expression darkened. "The timing's too perfect. The board approved exploration of alternative funding models this morning, essentially opening the door for Frank's developers." He lowered his voice. "Jack, there's something else you should know. The python isn't the only exotic that's turned up mysteriously. We found evidence of a released tiger on the west side yesterday. Tracks, scat. It's out there somewhere." "Jesus," Jack breathed. "He's creating a dangerous wildlife narrative, scaring people into thinking the preserve can't manage its animals." A flash of movement caught Jack's attention, and through his binoculars he spotted a man with camera equipment on a distant ridge photographing their emergency response. The puzzle pieces clicked into place. "He's documenting the crisis," Jack realized aloud. "Creating a public relations disaster for us. The python attack, the emergency response, and now the flood evacuation. It's all going to make us look incompetent." Robert nodded grimly. "Board's already talking about liability concerns. One more incident might be all it takes to shut us down permanently." The first fat raindrops began to fall as the team successfully loaded Bull into the trailer. The massive animal was sedated but stable, his breathing stronger after Emma's emergency treatment. As Jack secured the trailer doors, he caught sight of Bull's eyes tracking him, alert despite the sedatives. "That's one special animal," Martha observed, appearing at Jack's side. "Most would have given up by now." "He's too stubborn to die," Jack replied, managing a small smile. Martha's weathered face turned serious. "In my 78 years, I've seen a lot of animals come and go. That bull has something different in his eyes, something that reminds me—" She paused, studying Bull more intently. "The markings on his ear. Where did you say he came from originally?" Before Jack could answer, a blinding flash of lightning split the sky, followed immediately by a deafening crack of thunder. The storm had arrived in earnest, and with it came a wall of rain that reduced visibility to mere feet. "We need to move now," Robert shouted over the sudden downpour. "Creek's already rising upstream." As their small convoy began the treacherous journey toward higher ground, Jack couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched, and not just by the lions, which had vanished at the first rumble of thunder. Frank's calculated attacks were escalating, and Bull seemed to be at the center of it all. The question was why? The utility vehicle struggled through the increasingly muddy terrain, wipers barely keeping up with the torrential rain. In the side mirror, Jack could see water already pooling in the depression they'd left behind. The water hole was rapidly expanding beyond its banks. Martha clutched the dashboard as they navigated a particularly steep incline. "Frank's always been ruthless, but this is different," she shouted over the storm. "This feels personal." Jack nodded, pieces falling into place. "It is personal. Bull was the first animal I rescued after joining the preserve, the case that put Frank on probation and cost him that county commissioner seat." He paused, realization dawning. "And Bull isn't just any bull. He's from my family's bloodline. Frank knows that." Martha's eyes widened. "He's not just attacking the preserve. He's attacking you through something you love." Her expression changed suddenly as she stared more closely at Bull through the rear window. "Wait, your family raised Brahmins with that particular ear marking? The split and double punch?" Jack glanced back, surprised by her specific knowledge. "Yes. It was my grandfather's registration mark." "Why?" Martha's face had gone pale. "Because 20 years ago, I sold a pregnant Brahmin heifer with that exact bloodline to your father. I'd know those markings anywhere." She met Jack's shocked gaze. "That bull isn't just from your family's farm, Jack. He's from my original stock. In a way, we both have claim to him." The revelation hit Jack like a physical blow. Bull wasn't just the last connection to his lost family. He was living proof of connections that ran deeper and farther than he'd ever imagined. The animal that had survived so much, that had somehow found its way back to him after the flood, carried the legacy of both families in his blood. As this new understanding settled between them, the utility vehicle's engine sputtered and died, leaving them stranded halfway up the ridge. Through the curtain of rain, the maintenance shed was visible but still several hundred yards away. "Perfect," Jack muttered, trying the ignition again with no success. Water had likely entered the fuel line. Emma's voice crackled over the radio. "Jack, Bull's showing signs of distress. We need to get him under shelter now." Robert's vehicle had made it to the shed ahead of them. "I'll come back with the winch," he responded. "Stay put." But as Jack scanned their surroundings, he realized staying put wasn't an option. Water was already flowing down the hillside in ever-strengthening rivulets, carving channels that threatened to undermine their position. And in the distance, barely visible through the rain, a familiar black SUV sat watching from the adjacent ridge. Frank was observing their struggle, documenting their failure, and judging by his position, he'd known exactly where they would attempt to evacuate to. "He's been planning this all along," Jack said grimly, pointing out the SUV to Martha. "The python, the flood timing. He knew every move we'd make." Martha's eyes narrowed, because someone's been feeding him information. "We have a traitor." The storm intensified as Jack, Martha, and Emma worked frantically to secure Bull's trailer on the increasingly unstable slope. Water coursed down the hillside in growing streams, turning the dirt to treacherous mud beneath their feet. With each flash of lightning, Jack caught glimpses of Frank's SUV on the ridge, a silent sentinel observing their struggle. "We need to get Bull out of the trailer," Emma shouted over the rain. "If it slides, he'll be trapped." Jack nodded grimly and began unfastening the rear door. Inside, Bull lay on his side, eyes alert despite the sedation, tracking Jack's movements with remarkable awareness. The massive animal seemed to understand the danger, remaining unnaturally still as they worked. "Easy, old friend," Jack murmured, placing a reassuring hand on Bull's rain-soaked flank. "We're going to move you somewhere safe." Martha appeared with a length of rope. "We can use this as a guideline. The shed's only 200 yards up, but in this visibility—" Her words were cut short by a bone-chilling roar that rose above the storm's fury. Jack's blood ran cold as he recognized the sound. Not the familiar grunt of a bull or the call of native wildlife, but the unmistakable roar of a big cat. "The tiger," he breathed, suddenly remembering Robert's warning. "It's found us." Emma's face paled. "You're saying there's actually a tiger out here? I thought that was just a rumor." "Robert found tracks yesterday," Jack confirmed, scanning the rain-blurred landscape. "Another coincidental exotic release." "Frank?" Martha spat the name like a curse. "He's throwing everything at us at once. The python, the flood, now a tiger." As if to confirm her accusation, the big cat roared again, closer this time. Through sheets of rain, Jack caught a flash of striped orange. The tiger was working its way around the base of the hill, perhaps drawn by the scent of Bull's blood. "We need to move now," Jack decided, grabbing Bull's halter. "Can you stand, boy?" To everyone's surprise, Bull began struggling to his feet, massive muscles trembling with effort. Despite his injuries and the sedatives, the Brahmin pushed himself upright, swaying slightly but determined. Jack had never seen such will in an animal before. "That's impossible," Emma whispered. "With those injuries and the drugs in his system." "Not impossible," Martha corrected, a hint of pride in her voice. "Just extraordinary." With Bull miraculously on his feet, they began the arduous journey up the muddy slope toward the maintenance shed. Jack led the bull, Emma supported his wounded side, and Martha forged ahead with the guide rope, her 78 years seeming to fall away in the face of crisis. "There's Robert!" Martha called out, pointing toward a figure approaching through the downpour. The preserve administrator had braved the storm to help them, carrying additional rope and medical supplies. "The creek's breached its banks," he shouted as he reached them. "Lower sections of the preserve are already underwater. We need to hurry." Together, the four of them guided Bull up the treacherous incline. The massive animal moved with surprising determination, as if understanding the stakes. Each step was a victory against pain, sedation, and the elements. "Almost there," Jack encouraged, both to Bull and himself, as the maintenance shed grew closer. A sudden flash flood surged around their ankles, nearly sweeping Martha off her feet. Jack lunged to catch her, maintaining his grip on Bull's halter with his other hand. "I've been weathering storms since before you were born, young man," Martha declared, regaining her footing with remarkable agility. "Takes more than a little water to put me down." They reached the shed just as another roar echoed through the storm, much closer now. Robert quickly unlocked the heavy doors, and they guided Bull inside the spacious structure. The building, originally designed to house tractors and maintenance equipment, provided blessed shelter from the driving rain. Most importantly, it sat on the highest point of the ridge, safe from all but the most catastrophic flooding. Emma immediately went to work examining Bull, whose miraculous burst of strength was beginning to fade. The massive animal lowered himself carefully to the concrete floor, sides heaving with exertion. "His pulse is racing," she reported, concern etching her features. "That effort may have worsened his internal injuries." Jack knelt beside Bull's head, stroking the broad forehead. "You did it, boy. You can rest now." Bull's dark eyes fixed on Jack with an intelligence that still startled him at times. There was recognition there and something deeper, a trust that transcended the usual boundaries between man and animal. "I've never seen a bond like that," Robert observed quietly. "It's like he understands everything." Martha approached with a bucket of fresh water for Bull. "Some connections can't be explained by science," she said. "My late husband used to say certain animals carry old souls." As Bull drank gratefully, Jack noticed Martha studying the animal's ear markings again, a strange expression on her face. "You recognized those markings earlier," Jack prompted, curiosity overriding immediate concerns. "You said you sold a heifer to my father?" Martha nodded slowly. 23 years ago. Your father was just starting his Brahmin program. He bought my prize heifer, Duchess. She was already bred to my best bull." She gestured to Bull's distinctive ear notches. "That's my family's registration mark, combined with your grandfather's secondary mark. This bull is descended from that bloodline. The coincidence seemed too great to be mere chance. Out of all the bulls in Texas, how did this one end up at Frank's ranch after the flood took our farm?" Jack wondered aloud. "Perhaps it wasn't coincidence," Robert suggested, joining their conversation. "After your family's tragedy, Frank bought several lots of livestock at auction. County records would show it." Jack's mind reeled at the implication. "You think Frank deliberately acquired animals from my family's liquidation sale?" "Frank never does anything without purpose," Martha said grimly. "He's been fixated on your family's land for decades. Your grandfather refused to sell to him back in the 80s. Did you know that?" Before Jack could respond, Emma called them over urgently. "He's developing a fever," she reported, hand on Bull's flank. "The infection's spreading faster than the antibiotics can work." Outside, the storm continued its assault, rain pounding on the metal roof like machine gun fire. Occasional flashes of lightning illuminated the interior of the shed through its few grimy windows. "Do we have enough supplies to treat him here?" Jack asked, pushing aside the revelations about Frank to focus on the immediate crisis. Emma shook her head. "I need my full kit from the clinic. These injuries are severe, Jack. Without proper treatment—" She left the sentence unfinished, but her meaning was clear. Robert checked his phone. "No signal. Landlines are probably down too. We're on our own until this passes." A sudden heavy impact against the shed door made them all jump. The metal door shuddered in its frame, followed by the unmistakable sound of claws scraping against steel. "The tiger," Jack whispered, reaching for his rifle. "It followed us." "Can it get in?" Emma asked, unconsciously moving closer to Bull's massive form. Robert shook his head. "This building was designed to secure equipment worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. Those doors are reinforced steel with heavy deadbolts. We're safe as long as we stay inside." As if challenging his assessment, another powerful blow struck the door, leaving a visible dent in the metal. "That cat is determined," Martha observed dryly. "Almost like it's been trained to target us specifically." Jack's eyes narrowed. "Or like it's been starved and then led here deliberately. This whole situation feels orchestrated." "By Frank?" Emma asked incredulously. "That would be attempted murder, not just sabotage." "Wouldn't be the first time," Martha muttered. "Ask the Henderson family if you can find any of them still alive." Robert looked troubled. "We need to consider the possibility that Frank has an accomplice on the inside." Someone who knew our evacuation protocols, Bull's routines, the maintenance shed location. The implication hung heavy in the air. Someone they trusted had betrayed them. But who? A flash of lightning illuminated Frank's SUV, still parked on the opposite ridge, visible through the shed's small window. Another vehicle had joined it now, a white pickup truck that Jack didn't recognize. "He's still watching," Jack said, pointing out the vehicles to the others. "And he's not alone." Martha squinted through the rain-streaked glass. "That's Peterson's truck, from the county commissioner's office. They're documenting everything." "Building their case against us," Robert concluded grimly. "Every struggle, every failure." Bull let out a low, pained sound that drew their attention back to his deteriorating condition. Emma worked frantically with their limited supplies, but concern was etched deeply in her features. "His temperature's still rising," she reported. "Without stronger antibiotics, I don't know if he'll make it through the night." Jack felt a cold weight settle in his stomach. After everything they'd survived, the original abuse at Frank's hands, the flood that claimed Jack's family, today's python attack, to lose Bull now to infection seemed a cruel twist of fate. "There has to be something we can do," he insisted, desperate for options. Martha's weathered hand came to rest on his shoulder. "Sometimes all we can do is be present," she said gently. "Let him know he's not alone." As Jack knelt beside Bull again, the massive animal shifted slightly, pressing his head against Jack's leg in a gesture that seemed almost human in its deliberateness. Despite his pain, Bull was offering comfort rather than seeking it. "He knows," Jack said softly, throat tight with emotion. "He understands what's happening." Emma approached with a grave expression. "Jack, I need to try something risky. The infection is spreading too quickly. I have a stronger antibiotic, but with his compromised system and without knowing exactly what was in that tranquilizer dart." "What are the odds?" Jack asked, already knowing he wouldn't like the answer. 50-50, she admitted. It could save him or push his system over the edge. Jack looked into Bull's eyes, finding a calm acceptance there that steadied his own resolve. "Do it. He's a fighter. Always has been." As Emma prepared the injection, Martha settled beside Jack, her gaze fixed on Bull with unusual intensity. "You know," she began hesitantly, "that heifer I sold to your father, Duchess, she had a remarkable quality about her. People used to joke she was more dog than cow. Would come when called by name, remember people she'd met only once." She paused, choosing her next words carefully. Her first calf had distinctive markings, a perfect white diamond on his forehead, just visible under the gray. Jack's breath caught as he gently brushed aside the hair on Bull's forehead, revealing exactly what Martha had described, a diamond-shaped white patch, nearly hidden by his silver-gray coat. "That's not possible," he whispered. "That calf would be 22 years old now," Martha finished. "Extraordinarily old for a bull, but not unheard of, and given proper care for most of his life on your family's farm." The implication was too fantastic to accept, yet the evidence was literally staring Jack in the face. "You're saying this isn't just from my family's bloodline? You think this is actually the original calf? The one my father bought from you before I was even born?" Martha smiled sadly. "In my experience, the most incredible things are often true. How else do you explain him finding you in that flood? Him recognizing you after years at Frank's ranch? The will to survive that defies medical explanation?" Emma, overhearing their conversation as she administered the antibiotic, looked skeptical but intrigued. "The average lifespan for a Brahman bull is about 15 years. 22 would be exceptional, but not impossible with ideal conditions." "And your family farm provided those conditions," Martha added. "Until the flood." Jack sat back, mind reeling. If Martha was right, Bull wasn't just the last connection to his lost farm. He was a living link to his father, to the foundation of the Thompson legacy. The revelation cast Frank's vindictive focus on Bull in an even more sinister light. It wasn't just about hurting Jack. It was about erasing the last vestige of the Thompson presence from the county. Frank knows, Jack realized aloud. That's why he bought him after the flood. That's why he treated him so badly. And that's why he's so determined to destroy him now. Spite is a powerful motivator, Martha agreed grimly. Your father outbid Frank on that prime bottomland back in '95. Your grandfather refused to sell him the water rights he needed in the '80s. The Thompsons have been thorns in Frank's side for 3 generations. Robert, who had been keeping watch at the window, suddenly tensed. Movement outside. Someone's approaching on foot. Jack grabbed his rifle, moving quickly to the window. Through the downpour, he could make out a solitary figure struggling up the muddy slope toward the shed. As lightning flashed again, Jack recognized the distinctive cowboy hat and gait. "It's Davis," he said, naming the preserve's newest ranger. "What's he doing out in this storm?" "He was supposed to be securing the visitor center," Robert said, suspicion edging his voice. "I gave explicit orders." Jack's hand tightened on his rifle. "Or he was supposed to be watching us for Frank." "Let's not jump to conclusions," Emma cautioned. "He might just be checking that we made it safely." "Only one way to find out," Jack replied, moving toward the door. The tiger had gone silent, but that didn't mean it had left the area. Opening the door carried significant risk. As Davis approached the final few yards to the shed, Jack noticed something odd about his movements. A furtive quality, his hand repeatedly checking something inside his jacket. When the young ranger raised his head, the expression on his face was not one of concern for colleagues, but of grim determination. "He's not here to help," Jack said quietly, raising his rifle. "Everyone back away from the door." Martha positioned herself protectively beside Bull, while Emma grabbed a heavy wrench from a nearby workbench. Robert moved to Jack's side, his own sidearm drawn. "Davis!" Jack called through the door. "Stop right there!" The young ranger froze, momentarily startled by the command. His hand moved inside his jacket again. "Take your hand out slowly where I can see it," Jack ordered. Instead, Davis bolted, turning to sprint back down the hill. Jack wrenched open the door, prepared to pursue, only to freeze at the sight before him. The tiger stood not 20 yards away, water streaming from its magnificent orange coat as it watched Davis's retreating form with predatory intensity. "Close the door!" Robert shouted, but it was too late. The tiger, startled by the sudden movement and noise, abandoned its focus on Davis and charged directly toward the open shed. Jack had a split-second decision to make. Shooting the tiger, an endangered animal released through no fault of its own, was the last thing he wanted, but the safety of everyone in the shed had to come first. As Jack raised his rifle, a tremendous force knocked him sideways. Bull, somehow finding extraordinary strength, had risen to his feet and charged past them toward the open door, directly into the path of the oncoming tiger. The two animals collided in a blur of orange and silver, a terrible crash of muscle and intent. The tiger, though powerful, was met with over 1,000 pounds of determined Brahman bull. Bull caught the big cat with his remaining unbroken horn, tossing it aside like a rag doll before positioning himself squarely in the doorway, a living barrier between the predator and the humans he was protecting. "My God," Emma whispered, her scientific mind struggling to process what they were witnessing. The tiger recovered quickly, circling and snarling but hesitant to launch another direct assault against such formidable defenses. Bull stood his ground, massive head lowered, blood streaming from reopened wounds, but unwavering in his protective stance. "He's defending us," Martha said, voice thick with emotion. "Just like he defended you in the flood, Jack." In that moment, any lingering doubt about Bull's identity vanished. This wasn't just any animal acting on instinct. This was a creature with history, with memory, with a connection that defied conventional understanding. Jack moved carefully to Bull's side, rifle still trained on the circling tiger. "Together, old friend," he murmured, "just like always." A gunshot cracked through the storm, startling both animals and humans. The tiger yowled and retreated, a visible wound on its flank. On the opposite ridge, Frank Weston stood outside his SUV, rifle raised for another shot. "He's shooting the tiger," Robert said incredulously. "His own plant." "Tying up loose ends," Martha corrected grimly. "Can't have evidence of exotic animal trafficking leading back to him." The wounded tiger disappeared into the storm, leaving Bull swaying in the doorway, his monumental effort clearly taking its final toll. As Jack moved to support him, the massive animal's legs buckled. They guided him back inside, closing and barricading the door behind them. "That was impossible," Emma kept repeating, medical training at odds with what she had just witnessed. With those injuries, the sedative still in his system, the fever, it was physiologically impossible. Martha helped settle Bull back onto his makeshift bed of straw. "Some things can't be measured by your instruments, doctor. Some bonds go deeper than science can explain." Bull's breathing had become shallow and rapid, his pulse weak under Emma's examining fingers. The exertion had cost him dearly. Jack knelt beside his head, stroking the broad forehead where the white diamond marking was barely visible beneath years of silver-gray hair. "You've done enough," he whispered fiercely. "More than enough. Rest now." As if understanding, Bull's eyes drifted closed, his massive body relaxing incrementally. Emma continued working, administering fluids and monitoring vital signs, but her expression told Jack everything he needed to know. Bull's extraordinary effort had likely cost him whatever chance he had at recovery. Outside, the storm began to subside, the torrential downpour easing to a steady rain. Through the window they could see Frank's SUV departing, its taillights disappearing into the gloom. The immediate danger had passed, but the damage was done. "I just got a text from the main office," Robert announced, his phone finally showing a signal. "The creek's receding already. This wasn't the catastrophic flood they predicted, just a heavy storm surge." "Another convenient coincidence," Martha observed bitterly. "Frank probably has someone at the weather service, too." As they took stock of their situation, Jack remained by Bull's side, the rise and fall of the animal's chest becoming increasingly labored. Despite everything they'd survived together, abuse, flood, python, tiger, it seemed this final act of protection might be the one that took Bull from him for good. "I can't lose him," Jack said quietly, more to himself than the others. "Not like this. Not because of Frank's vendetta." Martha settled beside him, her weathered hand coming to rest on his shoulder. "Sometimes the greatest gift we can give is just being present at the end. No one should die alone, Jack, human or animal." As the night deepened and the storm gradually passed, they maintained their vigil. Emma exhausted every medical option available, but Bull's condition continued to deteriorate. His breathing grew more shallow, his once alert eyes dulled by pain and approaching darkness. In those quiet hours, Jack found himself talking to Bull, reminiscing about the farm, about his father and grandfather, about the bloodlines that connected them all. Whether the massive animal truly understood didn't matter. The words were as much for Jack as for Bull, a recognition of all they had shared and all they stood to lose. "You know, my father used to say you were the smartest calf he'd ever raised," Jack said softly. "Said you figured out how to unlatch the gate before you were 6 months old. Always knew when a storm was coming before the weather service did." He swallowed hard. "He would have been proud to see how you protected us today." Bull's eye opened slightly at the sound of Jack's voice, a flicker of recognition amid the haze of pain. His massive head shifted, pressing against Jack's leg one final time. As dawn approached, bringing with it the first tentative rays of sunlight, Bull's breathing became increasingly erratic. Emma, exhausted from her night-long efforts, shook her head sadly. "I'm sorry, Jack. I've done everything I can. The next few hours." She couldn't finish the sentence. Jack nodded, understanding what remained unspoken. Bull was dying. Not from the python's attack itself, but from the combination of tranquilizer, infection, and the tremendous exertion of protecting them one final time. As the sun broke over the horizon, painting the storm-washed landscape in gold, Jack opened the shed door to let fresh air and light reach Bull's resting place. The massive animal deserved to feel the morning sun one more time. Martha joined him at the door, her eyes red-rimmed from tears she'd tried to hide. "In all my years," she said quietly, "I've never seen such courage in an animal, or such love." Jack could only nod, words failing him as he watched Bull's labored breathing, each rise and fall of the massive chest, possibly the last. "Some bonds," Martha continued, her voice gaining strength, "transcend understanding. They're not meant to be broken, Jack. Not by flood or storm or evil men." She squeezed his arm. "Have faith in that bond." "It's brought you both this far." As the morning light strengthened, warming the air after the storm's passage, Jack faced the growing realization that by sunset, Bull would likely be gone, taking with him the last living connection to the Thompson legacy, to Jack's father and grandfather, to the life that had been washed away in the flood. The thought was almost unbearable. Yet as he watched Bull's struggling form, Jack also recognized the gift he'd been given. Not just Bull's extraordinary protection, but the opportunity to be present, to ensure that his loyal friend wouldn't face his final journey alone. In a world that had taken so much from Jack, that connection, that privilege of bearing witness, was perhaps the greatest treasure of all. Morning light streamed through the open shed door, casting long golden beams across Bull's massive form. The Brahman's breathing had grown shallower through the night, each labored rise and fall of his chest a battle against failing strength. Jack hadn't left his side, his hand resting on the animal's broad forehead, where the white diamond marking, now visible after Martha's revelation, seemed to glow in the dawn light. Emma had done everything possible with their limited supplies, but her medical expertise couldn't overcome the combined assault of the python's crushing damage, the mysterious tranquilizer, and Bull's extraordinary exertion in defending them. She checked his vitals again, her professional demeanor slipping as she met Jack's questioning gaze. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "His organs are failing. It's just a matter of hours now." Martha stood in the doorway, her silhouette framed by the sunrise. At 78, she had witnessed countless births and deaths on her ranch, but the emotion etched in her weathered features revealed how deeply Bull's impending loss affected her. "I called the main office," Robert reported quietly, joining them. "Roads are clearing now that the storm's passed. I've arranged for emergency transport, but—" He left the thought unfinished, the likelihood that help would arrive too late hanging unspoken between them. "Frank's gone," he added, nodding toward the opposite ridge where the black SUV had been stationed throughout the night. "Cleared out at first light." "Probably thinks he's won," Martha said bitterly. The preserve on the verge of closure, Bull dying, evidence of his sabotage disappearing with that tiger. Jack barely registered their conversation, his focus entirely on Bull. The massive animal's eyes, once so alert and expressive, were now dulled with pain, yet they remained fixed on Jack's face with unmistakable recognition. "You've fought long enough, old friend," Jack said softly, his voice rough with unshed tears. It's okay to rest now. As if understanding, Bull exhaled deeply, his massive body seeming to sink further into the straw bedding. Emma moved forward quickly, stethoscope ready, but Jack waved her back. This moment belonged to him and Bull alone, a private farewell between survivors who had shared more than words could express. Martha approached slowly, kneeling despite her arthritic knees to place a weathered hand on Bull's flank. "He knows you're here, Jack. That's what matters most at the end, knowing you're not alone." A vehicle approached outside, tires crunching on the gravel road that had emerged from the receding floodwaters. Jack didn't turn, unwilling to leave Bull even for a moment. Robert moved to the door, tension visible in his shoulders. "It's Frank," he reported grimly, "and he's not alone. County sheriff's with him." Jack's head snapped up, fury replacing grief in an instant. "He's coming to gloat? Now?" "Worse," Robert replied. "I think he's coming to claim Bull. Legally, he still has grounds to argue ownership since the court ruling was provisional." The realization hit Jack like a physical blow. Frank wasn't content merely to destroy Bull. He wanted to possess him in death as a final twisted victory. The thought of Bull's body being dragged away by the man who had orchestrated his suffering was unbearable. "Over my dead body," Jack growled, reaching for his rifle. Emma stepped between him and the door. "That's exactly what he wants, Jack. To provoke you into something that destroys what's left of your life, too." "She's right," Martha said firmly. "We need to be smarter than him. Bull deserves better than violence in his final moments." Outside, car doors slammed, followed by approaching footsteps. Frank's voice carried through the morning air, unnaturally loud and performative. "Sheriff, I appreciate you coming out personally. As you can see, the situation here is exactly what I described to the board. Complete mismanagement, dangerous animals escaping, staff endangering themselves and county property." Robert moved to block the doorway as Frank appeared, the county sheriff trailing behind him with an uncomfortable expression. Frank's expensive boots were conspicuously clean despite the muddy conditions. His safari-style outfit an absurd costume for someone who hadn't ventured beyond his vehicle during the actual crisis. "Well, well," Frank called out, feigning surprise at finding them there. "Quite the night you've had, Thompson. Sheriff Collins and I have been surveying the damage across the preserve. Quite extensive." Sheriff Collins nodded awkwardly, clearly uncomfortable with his role. "Just documenting the situation for the county report," he explained, avoiding direct eye contact with Jack. "And what a situation it is," Frank continued, his voice dripping with false concern. "Exotic animals running loose, staff trapped by floodwaters, and—" He peered past Robert into the shed. "Is that the Brahman bull from yesterday's python incident? Looks like he's in pretty bad shape." Jack rose slowly, every muscle tense with restraint. "You know damn well why he's in this condition, Frank. You arranged it all. The python, the tranquilizer, probably even paid someone to manipulate the flood warning." Frank raised his eyebrows in exaggerated shock. "That's quite an accusation, Thompson. Sounds like the stress might be affecting your judgment." He turned to the sheriff. "This is exactly the kind of liability issue I was telling the board about. Unstable personnel making wild accusations when their mismanagement is exposed." Before Jack could respond, Martha stepped forward, her small frame somehow commanding immediate attention. "Sheriff Collins, I've known your family for 3 generations, and I've known Frank Weston even longer. That bull lying there is dying because of a deliberate attack orchestrated by this man." The sheriff shifted uncomfortably. "Mrs. Sullivan, I understand you're upset, but without evidence—" "We have the python," Emma interjected, professional authority in her voice. "A non-native species that couldn't possibly have arrived here naturally. We have a tranquilizer dart with a controlled substance that requires veterinary licensing. And we have photographic evidence of Frank observing the entire situation from safety while refusing to render aid. Wildlife encounters happen in nature preserves," Frank dismissed with a wave. As for my presence, I was documenting concerns for the county board as a responsible citizen. Now, if you'll excuse me." He moved toward the door. "I've come to collect my property." Jack stepped forward, placing himself between Frank and Bull. "What property would that be, Frank?" "That bull, of course," Frank replied smoothly. "Court awarded him to the preserve conditionally, pending proper care. I'd say yesterday's events demonstrate spectacular failure in that department. I've already filed emergency papers to reclaim him." "He's dying because of you," Jack said, his voice dangerously quiet. "He's dying because of incompetence," Frank countered. "And I intend to ensure he receives proper care in his final hours." The smile that accompanied these words revealed his true purpose, not care, but the satisfaction of a final victory. Sheriff Collins looked increasingly uncomfortable. "Mr. Weston, I'm not sure this is appropriate timing for ownership disputes." "Perhaps we should—" A sudden commotion outside interrupted him as several vehicles pulled up, doors slamming and voices calling out. Through the open doorway, Jack saw county animal control officers, preserve staff, and most surprisingly, a news van from the local television station. Robert stepped outside briefly, then returned with a puzzled expression. "They're saying there's a tiger loose on the preserve. Someone called in multiple sightings." Frank's composure slipped momentarily. "That's ridiculous. There's no tiger." "Then why did you shoot at one last night?" Martha challenged, eyes narrowing. "We all saw you fire at it from the ridge." The sheriff's attention sharpened. "You discharged a firearm on county property, Mr. Weston?" Frank recovered quickly. "I fired a warning shot to scare off what I thought might be a mountain lion threatening Mr. Thompson's group. I was attempting to help from a safe distance." "That's not what happened," Emma stated firmly. "I'm prepared to testify under oath that Mr. Weston deliberately shot at a tiger that shouldn't have been here and could only have been released by someone with exotic animal connections." The mounting tension was interrupted by a weak but distinct sound from Bull. Not his usual low rumble, but a strained bellow that immediately drew Jack back to his side. The massive animal was trying to rise, front legs pushing against the straw bedding with trembling determination. "Easy, boy," Jack soothed, kneeling beside him. "Don't strain yourself." Bull's eyes, which had been dulled with approaching death, suddenly seemed clearer, more focused. His nostrils flared as he tested the air, head turning slightly toward the open door. "What's happening?" Jack asked Emma, who rushed to check Bull's vitals. She frowned in confusion. "His heart rate is increasing, but it's stronger, not weaker." "He's fighting the organ failure somehow." Outside, the commotion grew as animal control officers organized a search party for the reported tiger. The news crew had set up cameras, capturing the aftermath of the storm and the emergency response. Frank watched with visible alarm as his carefully orchestrated narrative began slipping from his control. Bull bellowed again, louder this time, the sound resonating through the shed with surprising strength. To everyone's astonishment, he managed to get his front legs properly under him, massive head rising from the bedding. "That's impossible," Emma whispered, stethoscope still pressed to Bull's side. "Medically impossible." Martha moved closer, studying Bull with narrowed eyes. "He senses something. Look at his ears. The way he's testing the air." Jack followed her gaze, recognizing the alert posture he'd seen countless times when Bull detected something long before human senses could perceive it. But what could possibly be drawing such a response from the dying animal? The answer came moments later as a new vehicle arrived, a mud-splattered County Animal Services truck. The driver emerged quickly, followed by a man Jack had never seen before. Tall and distinguished despite his rain-soaked appearance, the stranger moved with purpose toward the shed. Frank's reaction was immediate and revealing. his face drained of color, composure cracking completely. "This is private county business," he called out, attempting to intercept the newcomer. "Who authorized your presence here?" The stranger ignored him completely, nodding respectfully to Sheriff Collins before addressing the group. "Dr. James Harrington, State Veterinary Authority. I received concerning reports about exotic animal incidents and improper wildlife management in this county." His gaze settled on Emma. "You must be Dr. Mitchell. Thank you for your detailed documentation." Emma straightened in surprise. "Documentation? I haven't sent anything to the state office yet." Dr. Harrington smiled slightly. "Perhaps not directly, but someone has been very thorough in forwarding evidence of systematic exotic animal releases and targeted attacks on preserve animals, including—" He produced a tablet from his weatherproof case. "These photos taken last night of Mr. Weston shooting at what appears to be a tiger, along with records of exotic animal purchases made through shell companies connected to Mr. Weston's business interests." Frank's face contorted with fury. "This is preposterous. You have no jurisdiction here, and those photos prove nothing." "On the contrary," Dr. Harrington replied calmly, "exotic animal trafficking falls precisely under my jurisdiction, and these photos, combined with the physical evidence your colleagues have collected, provide more than enough basis for a formal investigation." Bull bellowed again, the sound stronger than seemed possible given his condition. With a tremendous effort that left everyone speechless, the massive animal pushed himself fully upright, swaying but standing on all four legs, his gaze fixed on the doorway with an intensity that drew all eyes in that direction. A slender figure appeared, silhouetted against the morning light. Davis, the young ranger Jack had suspected of betrayal the previous night. But instead of the furtive, threatening demeanor Jack had perceived during the storm, Davis now moved with quiet confidence, nodding respectfully to Dr. Harrington before turning to face the group. "I apologize for the deception," he said, his voice steadier than Jack remembered, "but we needed irrefutable evidence of Mr. Weston's activities, evidence that would stand up in court." "You've been working with the state authorities?" Robert asked, bewilderment evident in his tone. Davis nodded. "For 6 months, we suspected Mr. Weston was behind the exotic animal releases but couldn't prove it until we caught him in the act." He turned to Jack. "I'm sorry about last night. I wasn't running away from you. I was retrieving the remote cameras we'd positioned around the shed." "Remote cameras that captured quite a compelling narrative," Dr. Harrington added, scrolling through images on his tablet. "Mr. Weston orchestrating the tiger release, his associate administering the tranquilizer to the bull prior to the python attack, and most damningly, Mr. Weston's conversation with county officials about using the manipulated crisis to force the preserve closure." Frank's composure had vanished entirely, his face mottled with rage. "You set me up. This is entrapment." "Actually," Sheriff Collins interjected, finding his backbone at last, "it's solid police work, and it matches reports we've received from former employees about your exotic animal purchases." He turned to Dr. Harrington. "I believe we have enough to take Mr. Weston into custody, pending formal charges." As Frank sputtered threats about lawyers and connections, Jack turned back to Bull, amazed to find the massive animal still standing, his eyes bright with an awareness that defied his medical condition. Emma knelt beside him, stethoscope moving frantically as she reassessed his vitals. "I don't understand," she murmured, wonder replacing clinical detachment. "His heart rate is normalizing. His breathing is improving. It's like his system is resetting somehow." Martha watched with a knowing smile. Sometimes the will to live is stronger than anything science can measure. He held on long enough to see justice done. Indeed, Bull's entire demeanor had transformed. Though still wounded and weak, the imminent shadow of death seemed to have receded. His eyes tracked the scene as Frank was led away in handcuffs, sheriff's deputies documenting evidence throughout the preserve. Dr. Harrington approached, observing Bull with professional interest. Remarkable animal. The report mentioned he defended your group against both python and tiger. Extraordinary behavior for a domestic bull. He's no ordinary bull, Jack replied, unable to keep pride from his voice. He's the last of my family's bloodline, raised on my father's farm before the flood took everything. And he's from my original stock before that, Martha added. 3 generations of careful breeding created him. In the old days, we'd have called him a heritage animal, irreplaceable. The veterinary authority nodded thoughtfully. Then his bloodline should be preserved. With proper medical care, many of these injuries can heal. He certainly demonstrated exceptional vitality. Hope, which Jack had carefully suppressed through the night, suddenly bloomed in his chest. You think he might recover? With immediate intensive care, yes. Dr. Harrington turned to Emma. I have a fully equipped mobile veterinary unit in my truck. Shall we collaborate, Dr. Mitchell? The transformation over the next few hours was nothing short of miraculous. As the morning stretched toward noon, Bull received proper medical treatment from both Emma and Dr. Harrington. Intravenous antibiotics fought the infection, fluids restored his strength, and proper wound care addressed the damage from both python and tiger. Throughout it all, Bull remained standing, swaying occasionally but refusing to lie down again, as if fearing that surrendering to rest might mean surrendering to death. Jack stayed at his side, supporting the massive head when Bull's strength faltered, speaking constant encouragement in a voice rough with emotion. By early afternoon, news crews had descended on the preserve, capturing the aftermath of Frank's arrest and the dramatic rescue efforts. The story rapidly transformed from one of mismanagement and danger to one of corruption exposed and extraordinary animal courage. Video of Bull defending the shed against the tiger, captured by Davis's remote cameras, went viral within hours. The board just called an emergency session, Robert reported, returning from a flurry of phone calls. Frank's development deal is officially dead. More importantly, they've approved emergency funding to keep the preserve operating while we secure long-term support. And you'll have it, Dr. Harrington assured them. The State Wildlife Authority has been concerned about Mr. Weston's activities for some time. Your preserve serves an essential function in this ecosystem, one we're prepared to support financially and politically. As the day progressed, Bull's condition continued to stabilize, defying both medical expectations and the grim prognosis of the previous night. Though still seriously injured, the immediate threat to his life had passed. Emma monitored him constantly, her scientific mind struggling to reconcile his recovery with her medical training. I've never seen anything like it, she confessed to Jack as they watched Bull take his first tentative steps around the shed interior. It's like he decided death wasn't an option. Some animals just have that extra something, Martha said, joining them. My husband used to say certain creatures carry the spirits of warriors. Looking at him now, I'd say he was right. Jack could only nod, words inadequate to express the tumult of emotions he felt. Relief, gratitude, and lingering disbelief that Bull had once again defied the odds that should have claimed him. 3 times now, the massive animal had stared death in the face, during the original flood, in the python's coils, and through the long night of organ failure, and 3 times he had emerged victorious. As sunset approached, painting the storm-washed landscape in hues of gold and amber, Jack led Bull slowly from the shed into the fresh air. The massive animal moved cautiously, favoring his injured side, but his head was held high, alert eyes surveying his domain. News cameras captured the moment, broadcasting live to an audience that had been captivated by the unfolding story. Martha stood nearby, unashamed of the tears that tracked down her weathered cheeks. Emma and Dr. Harrington monitored Bull's progress with professional concern, while Robert coordinated with county officials to process the evidence against Frank. "Look at him," Martha said softly. 22 years old and still fighting. Your father would have been so proud, Jack, of both of you. Bull stopped at the crest of the ridge, silhouetted against the setting sun. Despite his injuries, his massive form projected dignity and resilience, a living monument to survival against impossible odds. As a gentle breeze ruffled his silver-gray coat, the white diamond marking on his forehead caught the fading light, shining like a beacon. In that moment, Jack felt something long buried begin to heal within him, a wound deeper than any physical injury inflicted by the flood that had taken his family and farm. Bull wasn't just a survivor of that tragedy. He was a living bridge between past and future, proof that not everything precious had been lost. As darkness fell, stars emerging in the clear post-storm sky, Jack made a silent promise, not just to Bull, but to the legacy they both carried. Frank's defeat wasn't an ending, but a beginning, a chance to build something new from the foundations that remained. Bull seemed to sense his thoughts, turning his massive head to meet Jack's gaze. In those dark, intelligent eyes shone something beyond animal awareness, a recognition, a connection, a shared understanding that transcended the boundaries between species. "We made it, old friend," Jack said quietly, resting his hand on the bull's broad shoulder. "We made it through the storm." Bull's response was a gentle rumble, not the pained sounds of the previous night, but the familiar, reassuring vocalization Jack had known since childhood. The sound of home, the sound of hope. As preserve staff prepared comfortable overnight quarters for Bull, Jack stood watching the stars appear one by one, each pinprick of light a reminder that even the darkest nights eventually yield to dawn. Tomorrow would bring new challenges: Bull's ongoing recovery, the legal aftermath of Frank's arrest, the work of rebuilding the preserve's reputation and security. But for tonight, it was enough to breathe the clean post-storm air, to feel the solid presence of Bull beside him, and to know that against all odds they had prevailed together, not just surviving, but finding justice and vindication in the face of calculated cruelty. Martha joined him in his stargazing, her weathered hand finding his arm in the gathering darkness. "You know," she said thoughtfully, "my grandmother used to say that animals choose us, not the other way around. That the truly special ones find their way back to us no matter what separates them." Jack nodded, unable to dismiss the idea as mere superstition after everything they had witnessed. "He found me in the flood when I'd lost everything, found his way back to me after Frank took him, and now he's found his way back from death's door," Martha finished, squeezing his arm gently. "Some bonds can't be broken, Jack, not by time or distance or even the worst that men like Frank can do." As if in agreement, Bull's rumbling voice joined their conversation, a sound that carried through the night air like a promise of resilience, of connection, of a tomorrow worth fighting for. 3 weeks after Frank Weston's arrest, Willow Creek Nature Preserve buzzed with activity unlike anything it had seen in years. Volunteers cleared storm debris, repair crews patched damaged facilities, and a steady stream of visitors arrived daily, drawn by the story that had captured national attention. What had begun as a local scandal had transformed into something much larger, a symbol of resilience, justice, and the extraordinary bond between a man and a bull. Jack Thompson stood on the observation deck overlooking the special recovery paddock where Bull now spent his days. The Brahman's imposing figure moved with deliberate care around the enclosure, his gait still favoring the right side where the python's crushing grip had done the most damage. Though no longer in critical danger, Bull's recovery remained incomplete. Dr. Harrington had warned them that some injuries might never fully heal, a permanent limp, reduced lung capacity, weakness in his right foreleg. Yet to Jack's eyes, these imperfections only enhanced Bull's dignity, each careful step a testament to survival against overwhelming odds. "Your boy's got quite the fan club," Martha remarked, joining Jack at the railing. She nodded toward the gathering crowd of visitors along the paddock fence, phones raised to capture images of the now famous Bull. "Never thought I'd see the day when folks would drive 300 miles just to look at a Brahmin." Jack smiled faintly. "He deserves the recognition." Martha studied Jack's face, noting the dark circles under his eyes and the tension that hadn't fully left his shoulders despite Frank's incarceration. "You haven't been sleeping." It wasn't a question. Jack didn't bother denying it. "Keep seeing it all when I close my eyes. The python, the tiger, Bull collapsing." He exhaled heavily. "Keep thinking how close we came to losing everything." "But we didn't lose it," Martha reminded him gently. "That's what matters in the end." Below them, Bull had noticed Jack's presence and altered his path, moving with purpose toward the observation deck. Despite his injuries, the massive Bull's carriage remained regal, his silver-gray coat gleaming in the morning sun. Visitors exclaimed in delight as Bull positioned himself directly beneath Jack's location, massive head raised expectantly. "Still keeping tabs on you?" Martha observed with a smile. "Some things never change." Jack nodded, emotion tightening his throat. Bull's vigilant awareness of his whereabouts hadn't diminished during recovery. If anything, their connection seemed to have deepened through the shared trauma, each recognizing in the other a kindred survivor. Emma Mitchell approached, clipboard in hand and stethoscope around her neck. The past weeks had transformed her as well, the tentative veterinarian now carrying herself with newfound confidence after her crucial role in Bull's survival and Frank's prosecution. "Morning rounds complete," she reported. "His vitals are stable, temperature normal. The latest blood work shows the infection is completely cleared." She glanced down at Bull, waiting patiently below. "Though I suspect you already knew that." Jack managed a tired smile. "He tells me in his own way." Emma hesitated before continuing. "The state prosecutor called this morning. They've added animal cruelty charges based on the evidence we provided about the python attack. With the exotic animal trafficking, conspiracy, and attempted fraud charges, Frank's looking at serious prison time." Her expression darkened. "His lawyer is still trying to claim ownership of Bull as leverage." Jack's hands tightened on the railing. "He'll never touch Bull again, not while I'm breathing." "He won't need to try," Martha assured him. "The judge granted our emergency petition for permanent protective custody. Bull officially belongs to the preserve now, or more accurately to you as his appointed guardian." The legal victory should have brought relief, but Jack found himself unable to fully relax. Too much had happened. Too many close calls and betrayals. The knowledge that someone had helped Frank target Bull, had known the animal's routines and vulnerabilities, still haunted him. As if reading his thoughts, Emma lowered her voice. "They found connections between Frank and Davis's predecessor, Jason Mills, the ranger who left suddenly 6 months ago. Bank records show substantial payments from one of Frank's shell companies." The missing piece clicked into place. So it wasn't Davis after all. Mills gave Frank the information before he left, and Davis was actually working undercover to catch them. Jack shook his head. "I almost shot the man who was trying to help us." "But you didn't," Martha pointed out pragmatically. "And his evidence is what's putting Frank away." Below them, Bull had grown restless with waiting, releasing a low, insistent rumble that Jack recognized immediately. Despite medical orders to limit Bull's exertion, Jack found himself responding to the summons, heading down the stairs to the paddock entrance. Emma followed, medical concerns overriding protocol. "He shouldn't be excited, Jack. His ribs are still healing. But Jack knew what Bull needed better than any medical professional could. As he entered the paddock, Bull approached with careful, measured steps. The massive animal stopped an arm's length away, dark eyes fixed on Jack's face with an intensity that still took his breath away. Slowly, deliberately, Bull lowered his head, not in submission, but in invitation. Jack placed his hand on the broad forehead, fingers finding the white diamond marking now visible beneath the silver hair. Bull rumbled again, the vibration traveling through Jack's arm like a current connecting them. "I know, old friend," Jack murmured. "I miss being out there, too." The enforced confinement of recovery had been necessary but challenging for both of them. Bull, accustomed to ranging freely across the preserve, chafed at the paddock's limitations. Jack, though physically uninjured, had found himself equally restricted, bound by administrative duties, legal proceedings, and the constant attention from media and visitors that their story had attracted. "His recovery is remarkable," Emma observed from the fence, professional assessment mingling with genuine wonder. "Medically speaking, he shouldn't have survived that night." "Some things can't be explained by medicine," Martha replied softly. "Some bonds go deeper." Jack barely registered their conversation, his attention focused entirely on Bull. The massive animal leaned slightly against him, not enough to risk losing balance, but enough to communicate connection. In that quiet moment of contact, Jack felt the knot of tension he'd carried for weeks begin to loosen slightly. The peaceful interlude was interrupted by Robert Carson's arrival, the administrator looking more harried than usual despite the preserve's improving fortunes. "Jack, we've got a situation at the main gate. News crews mostly, but there's someone else. Frank's son, Michael Weston, says he needs to speak with you urgently." Jack stiffened. Michael Weston had inherited his father's business interests after Frank's arrest, but had remained conspicuously absent during the legal proceedings. His sudden appearance couldn't mean anything good. "What does he want?" Jack asked, instinctively moving closer to Bull. Robert shook his head. "Wouldn't say. Just that it's important and private. I can send him away if you'd prefer." Jack considered his options. Michael hadn't been implicated in his father's crimes, but the Weston name inspired little trust after everything that had happened. Still, ignoring him might create new problems they didn't need. "I'll meet him at the administrative office," Jack decided. "Keep the media away." As Jack turned to leave, Bull shifted uneasily, sensing the change in his demeanor. The massive animal took a halting step forward as if to follow, releasing a low sound of protest at their separation. "Stay with him," Jack instructed Emma, reluctantly moving toward the gate. "I won't be long." Martha intercepted him before he could exit. "You want me to come with you? I've known Michael since he was knee-high to a grasshopper. He was always the sensible one in that family." Jack appreciated the offer but shook his head. "Better if I handle this alone." "Frank used enough people as pawns in his games." The administrative building buzzed with activity as Jack entered, phones ringing with donation pledges, volunteers coordinating restoration efforts, and staff managing the sudden influx of public interest. He navigated through the controlled chaos to Robert's office, where Michael Weston waited alone. Unlike his father's flashy ostentation, Michael dressed conservatively in a simple button-down and slacks. At 40, he carried himself with the quiet confidence of someone accustomed to handling difficult situations discreetly. He rose as Jack entered, extending his hand without presumption. "Mr. Thompson, thank you for seeing me. I know this is unexpected." Jack left the handshake hanging, unwilling to feign cordiality. "What do you want, Michael? Your father's legal team is already causing enough problems." Michael withdrew his hand without offense, settling back into his chair. "That's partly why I'm here. I've instructed our attorneys to drop all claims against the preserve and Bull specifically." He placed a folder on the desk. This contains formal documentation renouncing any Weston family claim to the animal, plus compensation for damages incurred during my father's activities. Jack eyed the folder suspiciously, making no move to touch it. Why the sudden change of heart? Michael sighed heavily, the composed exterior slipping to reveal genuine distress. Because what my father did was unconscionable. I've spent the past 3 weeks reviewing the evidence, speaking with authorities, understanding the full scope of his actions. He met Jack's gaze directly. I'm not my father, Mr. Thompson. I never approved of his methods or his vendettas. Yet you benefited from them, Jack pointed out coldly. Yes, Michael acknowledged without evasion. And I have to live with that knowledge, but I can also try to make amends where possible. He gestured to the folder. The compensation is substantial, enough to upgrade your veterinary facilities and security systems. No strings attached, no publicity required. Jack's suspicion didn't waver. And what do you get out of this? The chance to sleep at night, Michael replied simply, and to separate the company's future from my father's crimes. He hesitated before adding, I also brought something else, something personal. From his briefcase, Michael withdrew a weathered, leather-bound book. This was in my father's private safe. It's a stud record from the Thompson farm auction after the flood. He kept meticulous notes about the animals he purchased, including, he opened the book to a marked page, this bull, your bull. Jack took the book with sudden urgency, eyes scanning the familiar handwriting, his father's careful documentation of bloodlines and breeding. Alongside were Frank's annotations, calculating in cold, detailing plans for the animals acquired. He bought 17 animals from your family's liquidation, Michael continued quietly. But this one, he tapped the page, showing Bull's registration, was the one he fixated on. The notes suggest he knew exactly who this bull was, not just any animal, but one with particular significance to your family. Jack's throat tightened as he read his father's description. Diamond Sovereign, born to Duchess, Sullivan bloodline, and King's Ransom. Best confirmation in 3 generations. Jack's special project since birth. My father, Jack managed, memories flooding back. Let me name him when I was just a kid. I helped deliver him, bottle-fed him when Duchess had complications. He looked up sharply. Frank knew exactly what he was taking. Michael nodded grimly. The records show he paid 3 times market value specifically to acquire him. It was never about the animal's monetary worth. It was about taking something he knew mattered to your family. The confirmation of Frank's calculated cruelty should have fueled Jack's anger, but instead he felt an odd sense of validation. The connection he'd sensed with Bull wasn't imagination or wishful thinking. It was the recognition of a bond formed in his childhood, somehow surviving through flood and separation and abuse. There's more, Michael said, turning to another marked section. My father kept records of the abuse, documenting the bull's breaking, as he called it. It's difficult reading, but it might help explain some of your bull's behaviors and reactions. Jack forced himself to scan the pages, each clinical description of deliberate cruelty burning into his consciousness. Frank had systematically worked to destroy Bull's spirit, to erase any trace of the animal's former identity and connection to the Thompson family. He failed, Jack said finally, closing the book. Bull remembered. Despite everything, he remembered. Michael's expression held genuine remorse. I'm truly sorry, Mr. Thompson. I knew my father could be ruthless in business, but this level of calculated cruelty... He shook his head. It's inexcusable. A heavy silence fell between them, broken eventually by Michael. There's one last thing. The stud book shows your bull's original registration papers were stored in a specific safe deposit box. He slid a key across the desk. "I've arranged access for you. Everything that rightfully belongs to your family is still there, including breeding records dating back 3 generations." Jack stared at the key, emotions warring within him. "Why are you really doing this, Michael?" "Because my father destroyed enough lives," Michael answered quietly. "I can't undo what he did, but I can try to make sure his hatred doesn't outlive his freedom." He rose to leave. "The money comes with no conditions, Mr. Thompson. Use it, refuse it, that's your choice. But the records and registration belong to your family, always have." After Michael departed, Jack remained in the office, the stud book open before him, memories surfacing that he'd long suppressed. His father showing him how to read bloodlines, his grandfather's pride in their breeding program, his own childhood connection with the bull calf he'd named Diamond Sovereign, shortened to Bull in daily use, a name that had somehow survived even when all other identity was stripped away. Martha found him there an hour later, still absorbed in the pages. She took one look at the familiar leather binding and inhaled sharply. "That's your father's stud book. How on earth—" "Michael Weston brought it," Jack explained, looking up with reddened eyes. "Frank kept it all these years, along with this." He pushed the registration certificate across the desk. Martha's weathered hands trembled as she lifted the document. "Diamond Sovereign, registration number 7734B. Sire, King's Ransom, Dam, Duchess of Willowbrook." Her voice caught. "My Duchess, I knew it." "He remembered, Martha," Jack said quietly. "Through everything, the flood, Frank's abuse, the years at the preserve, he remembered who he was, who I was." Martha settled into the chair across from him, the registration certificate cradled like something precious. "Animals know more than we give them credit for, especially the special ones. My husband always said Duchess was the smartest cow he'd ever bred. Her son would carry that same intelligence." Jack closed the stud book gently. "Michael's offering compensation. Substantial funding for the preserve, no strings attached." "And you're wondering if you should take it," Martha concluded. "Money from the Weston family after everything Frank did." "It feels wrong," Jack admitted. "Like blood money." Martha considered this. "When I was a girl, my father taught me something about holding grudges. He said, 'Martha, hate's a heavy thing to carry and it'll break your back long before it hurts the one you're hating.'" She tapped the folder. "Maybe this is Michael's way of putting down a weight his father carried. Maybe you should consider doing the same." Before Jack could respond, Emma burst into the office, professional composure abandoned in obvious distress. "It's Bull," she gasped. "He's collapsed. We need you now." The world narrowed to a tunnel as Jack sprinted across the preserve, Martha and Emma struggling to keep pace behind him. Visitors and staff moved aside as he raced toward the recovery paddock, fear propelling him forward with desperate speed. He found Bull on his side in the paddock's soft dirt, massive body unnaturally still, breathing shallow and labored. Dr. Harrington was already kneeling beside him, medical bag open, expression grave as he administered an injection. "What happened?" Jack demanded, dropping to his knees at Bull's head. "Secondary complication," Dr. Harrington explained tersely. "Likely a blood clot from the crush injuries. It's moved to his lungs." Emma joined them, immediately assisting with equipment and medication. "His oxygen levels are dropping. We need to get him to the treatment facility." "He can't be moved in this condition," Dr. Harrington countered. "We'll have to treat him here." Jack cradled Bull's massive head, horror washing over him as he recognized the same labored breathing, the same dulling awareness in the animal's eyes that had presaged his near death 3 weeks earlier. After everything they'd survived, after Frank's defeat and the promise of a new beginning, to lose Bull now to a hidden complication seemed an unbearable cruelty. "Stay with me, old friend," Jack pleaded, his voice breaking. "We've come too far to lose you now." Bull's eye rolled toward him. recognition flickering despite the animal's obvious distress. His breathing grew more strained, each inhalation a battle against failing physiology. Dr. Harrington worked methodically, administering medications to dissolve the suspected clot, while Emma monitored Bull's vitals with increasing concern. A crowd had gathered at the paddock fence, staff, volunteers, visitors, all watching in silent witness to the unfolding crisis. "His pulse is weakening," Emma reported, the professional mask slipping to reveal genuine anguish. "Oxygen saturation still dropping." Martha knelt beside Jack, her weathered hand coming to rest on Bull's massive shoulder. "Don't you give up," she told the animal firmly. "You hear me, Diamond Sovereign? Your Mama Duchess never quit on anything in her life, and you don't have permission to quit now." Whether Bull understood the words or merely responded to the familiar voices, his breathing steadied slightly, buying precious moments for the medications to work. Dr. Harrington continued treatment with grim determination, his experienced hands moving with precise efficiency, despite the less-than-ideal field conditions. Minutes stretched into an hour, then two. The gathered crowd remained, conversations hushed, many offering silent prayers or words of encouragement. Jack stayed positioned at Bull's head, speaking constantly in low tones, reminding the massive animal of their shared past, the farm where he was born, the flood they'd survived together, the future that still awaited them. Gradually, imperceptibly at first, Bull's breathing eased. The terrible strain in his massive body began to relax as the medications slowly did their work, dissolving the clot that had threatened his life. "It's working," Dr. Harrington confirmed finally, relief evident beneath his professional demeanor. "His oxygen levels are improving. We're not out of the woods, but the immediate crisis is passing." The news rippled through the watching crowd, releasing the collective tension that had held them silent. Spontaneous applause broke out, quickly hushed as people remembered the animal's need for calm. Emma sank back on her heels, exhaustion and relief warring in her expression. "I thought we were losing him." "Not today," Martha said firmly, the certainty in her voice brooking no argument. "This Bull's got more living to do." As afternoon stretched toward evening, Bull remained under close medical supervision, but the crisis had clearly passed. Though still weak, his breathing had normalized, and the awareness had returned to his eyes. Dr. Harrington prescribed blood thinners and additional monitoring, but expressed cautious optimism about recovery. "He'll need to be even more carefully managed now," he told Jack as they watched Bull rest. "No exertion, limited movement for at least 2 weeks. This kind of complication could recur without proper precautions." Jack nodded, understanding the implications. Bull's recovery had just become more complicated, more restricted, and potentially longer term than they'd initially hoped. The dream of returning him to his former freedom within the preserve might need to be permanently adjusted. As twilight descended, the crowds dispersed, leaving Jack alone with Bull in the quiet paddock. Martha had gone to coordinate an evening meal for the exhausted medical team, while Emma and Dr. Harrington prepared additional medications for the night ahead. In the growing darkness, Jack settled beside Bull's massive form, the stud book open on his lap. By flashlight, he read aloud from his father's entries, descriptions of Diamond Sovereign's birth, early development, and promising future. Words written in a time before flood and loss, when the Thompson legacy seemed secure and unending. "He had such plans for you," Jack told the resting Bull quietly. "Championship bloodlines, best conformation in the county. He said you had the perfect balance of size and temperament." He turned the page, finding a personal note in his father's handwriting that he'd missed earlier. "Jack's connection with this calf is something special. Never seen anything like it. Boy's got a natural way with him that can't be taught. Diamond follows him like a dog, seems to understand every word. might be the foundation of something extraordinary when Jack takes over the farm someday. Tears blurred Jack's vision as he closed the book. The future his father had envisioned, Jack continuing the family legacy, building on foundations laid through generations, had been washed away in a single night of catastrophic flooding. Everything lost except this one bull, who through some miracle of memory and connection had found his way back. "We're not done yet," Jack promised, resting his hand on Bull's broad forehead, where the white diamond marking caught the last light of day. "We've got a new legacy to build now." Bull's response was a soft exhalation, his massive body relaxing further into restful sleep. The immediate danger had passed, but the day's events had made one thing painfully clear. Bull's remarkable resilience had limits. Even the strongest spirit couldn't overcome every physical challenge, and each recovery became more difficult, more tenuous. Jack remained through the night, dozing occasionally but mostly keeping vigil as stars wheeled overhead. The weight of the day's revelations, Frank's calculated cruelty, Michael's unexpected atonement, Bull's near death and reprieve, settled over him like a heavy mantle. So much had been lost and found, threatened and saved, within the space of mere hours. As dawn approached, painting the eastern sky with tentative light, Jack made a decision. The compensation Michael offered, the money he had initially viewed with such suspicion, now represented something essential, the means to ensure Bull would never again face such precarious circumstances. With proper facilities, specialized care, and enhanced security, the preserve could become the safe haven Bull deserved for whatever time remained to him. More importantly, it could become a living legacy, not just for Bull, but for everything he represented. The Thompson bloodlines wouldn't end with him. They would become the foundation for something new, something hopeful. With that resolution forming, Jack watched the sunrise illuminate Bull's powerful form, still imposing despite injury and illness, still dignified even in vulnerability. Whatever challenges tomorrow might bring, they would face them as they had faced everything else. Together, united by a bond that had somehow survived flood and separation and the worst of human cruelty. A bond that, against all odds, had proven stronger than hatred itself. The county courthouse buzzed with tension as Jack Thompson entered for Frank Weston's sentencing hearing. 3 months had passed since the dramatic events at Willow Creek Preserve, 3 months of healing, rebuilding, and preparing for this day of reckoning. Jack adjusted his bolo tie, feeling strange in the formal Navy suit he rarely wore. The familiar weight of the Thompson cattle brand pendant rested against his chest, no longer hidden beneath his shirt, but worn proudly as a symbol of the legacy he was reclaiming. Martha Sullivan sat in the front row, her silver hair perfectly pinned and her best turquoise jewelry gleaming. At 78, she remained a formidable presence, straightening her spine as Frank Weston was led into the courtroom in handcuffs and prison orange. The once powerful rancher's silver-white hair had lost its careful styling, and his commanding presence had diminished during months of incarceration. Only the cold calculation in his blue eyes remained unchanged as he surveyed the packed gallery. The judge, a no-nonsense woman with 30 years on the bench, reviewed the extensive charges: animal cruelty, exotic animal trafficking, attempted fraud, conspiracy, destruction of county property, and evidence tampering. The prosecution had built an airtight case, strengthened by Davis's undercover surveillance footage and Dr. Harrington's expert testimony about the deliberate nature of the attacks on Bull. "The court now calls for victim impact statements," the judge announced, her gaze settling on Jack. "Mr. Thompson, you may approach." Jack rose slowly, acutely aware of every eye in the courtroom following his progress to the witness stand. He had rehearsed this moment countless times, yet the carefully prepared words seemed to evaporate as he faced Frank directly for the first time since the night of the storm. Instead, what emerged was something rawer and more honest. "Your Honor, I'm not a man of many words," he began, his voice steady despite the emotion tightening his throat. "But I need to speak about what was nearly lost because of Frank Weston's actions. Diamond Sovereign, Bull, isn't just any animal. He's the last living link to my family's heritage, to the farm we lost in the flood, to my father and grandfather's life's work." Jack described the night of the python attack, the calculated cruelty behind it, and Bull's extraordinary courage in the face of overwhelming odds. As he spoke, the courtroom grew utterly silent, hanging on every word of the unfolding story. "But this isn't just about an animal being harmed," Jack continued, his gaze never leaving Frank's increasingly uncomfortable face. "It's about a man who used his power and connections to systematically destroy what others valued simply because he could. It's about decades of vendettas carried out against families like mine and Martha Sullivan's, against anyone who stood in the way of his ambitions." Frank shifted in his seat, his lawyer whispering urgently in his ear. For the first time, Jack glimpsed something beyond cold calculation in the older man's eyes, perhaps the dawning realization that his actions had finally caught up with him. "Your Honor, I'm not asking for vengeance," Jack concluded, surprising even himself with the words. "But I am asking for justice, not just for Bull, not just for me, but for everyone in this county who lived under the shadow of fear that Frank Weston cast. And I'm asking for protection, to ensure that when I return to Willow Creek today, I can look Bull in the eye and tell him truthfully that the man who tried to destroy him will never have the power to harm him again." As Jack returned to his seat, Martha squeezed his arm in silent approval. The testimony that followed from other victims of Frank's schemes, families driven from their land, businesses mysteriously burned after refusing to sell, county officials threatened into compliance, painted a damning picture of decades of corruption and intimidation. When the judge finally delivered her sentence, 15 years without possibility of early parole, plus financial restitution to all victims, including the preserve, the gallery remained silent, absorbing the finality of Frank Weston's fall from power. Only as he was led away did Jack notice Michael Weston sitting quietly in the back row, his expression unreadable as he watched his father's departure. Outside the courthouse, spring sunshine bathed the county square in golden light. Jack loosened his tie, breathing deeply of air that somehow seemed fresher, cleaner, without the weight of Frank's impending judgment hanging over them. "Well, that's done," Martha said, joining him on the courthouse steps. 15 years. "He'll be an old man when he gets out." "If he gets out," Jack replied. "The state investigations are just beginning. There's talk of federal charges next." Martha nodded, satisfaction evident in her weathered features. "Justice catches up eventually, even to men like Frank. Now, shouldn't we be getting back? Emma texted that Bella's showing signs of early labor. That first calf could arrive any day now." The mention of Bella's pregnancy, the first of Bull's offspring, conceived shortly after the successful introduction of the heifers, immediately shifted Jack's focus from courtroom drama to the future waiting at Willow Creek. The veterinary center construction was nearing completion, the education facility was already welcoming school groups, and most importantly, Bull had continued his remarkable recovery, adapting to his permanent injuries with characteristic dignity. Michael Weston approached as they prepared to leave, hesitation evident in his stride. Unlike his father, Michael dressed conservatively, his manner lacking Frank's intimidating bluster. He had maintained a respectful distance throughout the legal proceedings, though his financial support for the preserve had continued without interruption. "Mr. Thompson, Mrs. Sullivan," he greeted them formally. I wanted to thank you for your testimony today. It couldn't have been easy." Jack studied the man who had inherited Frank's business empire, but seemingly none of his vindictiveness. "It needed to be said for the record." Michael nodded, understanding the subtext. "I've been going through my father's private records. There's more. Things I think you should know about the Thompson farm auction after the flood." He hesitated, then continued. "He kept meticulous notes about the animals he purchased from your family's liquidation, especially Bull." Jack's attention sharpened. "What kind of notes?" "Records that prove he deliberately targeted that specific animal because of its significance to your family. He paid 3 times market value to acquire him, not for breeding purposes, but—" Michael couldn't quite finish the sentence. "To hurt the Thompsons one last time," Martha concluded, her voice hard with old anger. "To take something he knew mattered." Michael nodded, discomfort evident in his posture. "I've brought copies of everything. And there's something else, the original registration papers for Diamond Sovereign and the complete Thompson breeding records. My father kept them in a safe deposit box all these years." He extended a folder and a small envelope containing what appeared to be a key. Jack accepted them with hands that weren't quite steady, the weight of recovered history momentarily overwhelming. "Why are you doing this?" Jack asked, genuine curiosity tempering his suspicion. Michael considered the question carefully before answering. "Because restitution isn't just about money. It's about returning what was wrongfully taken." He paused, choosing his next words with evident care. "My father built his reputation on destroying others. I'd like to build mine on something better." With that simple statement, he nodded respectfully and departed, leaving Jack and Martha to absorb this unexpected development. The drive back to Willow Creek was spent in contemplative silence, Jack's mind swimming with the implications of Michael's revelations. The folder rested on the seat beside him, containing documentation of Bull's complete lineage, a tangible connection to the Thompson farming legacy he had thought lost forever. As they turned onto the preserve's newly paved entrance road, Martha finally broke the silence. "You know what this means, don't you? With those registration papers, the Thompson-Sullivan bloodline can be officially recognized again. The calves won't just be Bull's offspring, they'll be the continuation of both our families' work." Jack nodded, emotion tightening his throat. Dad would have been amazed to see this. His prized bull not only surviving, but becoming the foundation for something new. The preserve had transformed in the months since Frank's arrest. Michael Weston's compensation funding, combined with a surge of public support following Bull's viral story, had enabled rapid improvements. The new veterinary center stood nearly complete, its modern design harmonizing with the natural landscape. The education facility already welcomed daily visitors eager to learn about heritage breeding and conservation. Most significantly, Bull's expanded paddock now accommodated all 3 heifers, with a special birthing area prepared for the imminent arrival of the first calf. Emma Mitchell met them at the main office, her auburn hair pulled back in its customary ponytail, stethoscope around her neck. The tentative veterinarian of months past had blossomed into a confident professional, her successful management of Bull's recovery establishing her reputation throughout the region. "How's our expectant mother?" Jack asked, changing quickly from courthouse formal to preserve casual in the office bathroom. "Progressing normally," Emma reported, professionalism mingling with excitement. "Bella's showing all the preliminary signs. Could be tonight, could be tomorrow. First-time mothers can be unpredictable." They made their way to Bull's paddock, where the massive silver-gray Brahmin stood in the shade of his favorite oak tree, watchful eyes tracking their approach. Despite his permanent limp and the visible scars from his ordeal, he carried himself with undeniable dignity, the white diamond marking on his forehead catching the afternoon sun. Bella, her pregnancy now advanced, grazed nearby, occasionally glancing toward Bull as if for reassurance. Ruby and Scarlet completed the small herd, their distinctive colorations and perfect conformation showcasing the remarkable genetics that had nearly been lost. "He knows something's happening," Martha observed as Bull approached the fence, greeting Jack with the familiar rumble that had become their private communication. "Look how he keeps checking on Bella." Jack nodded, reaching across to stroke the white diamond marking. "The old bloodline instincts. Dad used to say our bulls always knew when a calf was coming, sometimes before the ranch hands noticed the signs." As evening approached, the preserve quieted, most visitors and staff departing until only the essential overnight team remained. Jack found himself reluctant to leave, drawn to the paddock by an inexplicable certainty that tonight would bring something momentous. He settled on the observation deck with Martha and Emma, the three of them sharing a simple dinner as darkness fell. "I've been thinking," Jack said, breaking a comfortable silence, "about naming conventions for the calves." Emma looked up with interest. "You're going back to the Thompson tradition?" Jack nodded, opening the folder Michael had provided. Inside were photographs, registration certificates, and handwritten breeding notes spanning 3 generations of Thompson bulls and heifers. "My grandfather started with royal titles, King's Ransom, Queen's Fortune. My father continued with Diamond Sovereign and others. I'd like to honor that, but also incorporate the Sullivan bloodline names." Martha's weathered face softened at this inclusion. "Herbert always favored Duchess and Earl titles for our best stock. Duchess of Willowbrook was his pride and joy before we sold her to your father. So perhaps," Jack suggested, "Diamond Duchess for Bella's calf, if it's a heifer. And Royal Legacy, if it's a bull." The simple act of naming, of planning for future generations, carried profound significance. After years of simply surviving, of preserving what remained, they were finally building something new from the foundation Bull had provided. Emma's radio crackled to life, a night assistant's voice breaking their contemplation. "Dr. Mitchell, we've got active labor signs from Bella. Might want to come check." The next hours passed in a blur of professional activity and mounting anticipation. Bella, true to her calm temperament, progressed through early labor with remarkable composure. Bull watched attentively from a connecting paddock, separated by a fence that allowed visual contact while preventing any interference with the birthing process. "He hasn't taken his eyes off her once," Martha marveled, watching Bull's focused vigilance. 23 years old and still remembering exactly what his role should be. Dawn was breaking when Bella's contractions intensified, the final stage of labor beginning in earnest. Emma directed her assistants with quiet efficiency, monitoring the heifer's progress while allowing nature to take its course. Jack and Martha remained at Bull's paddock, offering reassurance to the aging patriarch who seemed to understand exactly what was transpiring. The sun had just cleared the eastern ridge when a collective murmur from the birthing area announced success. Emma's face appeared above the paddock divider, her professional composure momentarily abandoned in favor of pure joy. "It's a bull calf," she called. "Perfectly formed, good size, and—" She paused, emotion catching in her throat. "He has the diamond marking, exactly like his father's." Jack rushed to the connecting gate, Martha following as quickly as her arthritic knees would allow. The scene in the birthing paddock was one of quiet wonder, Bella already on her feet, cleaning her newborn calf with maternal devotion. The tiny bull calf, still damp from birth, wobbled on spindly legs, his silver-gray coat gleaming in the morning light. And there, unmistakable on his forehead, was a perfect white diamond marking, the genetic signature of the Thompson bloodline. "Royal Legacy," Jack whispered, the name suddenly feeling inadequate for the miracle before them. This wasn't just a calf. This was continuation, renewal, the physical embodiment of hope after loss. Martha wiped unashamed tears from her weathered cheeks. "In all my years," she said softly, "I've never seen anything quite so perfect." Bull's deep rumble drew their attention back to the connecting paddock. The massive animal stood at the fence line, neck extended to catch the scent of his offspring, intelligent eyes fixed on the newborn with unmistakable recognition. Emma consulted briefly with her team before making a decision. "I think we can allow supervised contact. Bull's been so calm throughout, and it would be valuable for the calf to imprint on him as well as Bella." With careful precautions, they opened the connecting gate just wide enough for Bull to see and smell his offspring clearly, though not wide enough for him to enter fully. The massive animal approached with surprising gentleness, his movements deliberate and non-threatening as he extended his great head toward the wobbling calf. Bella watched attentively but without alarm, seeming to recognize the importance of this moment. The calf, responding to some instinct deeper than learning, tottered toward Bull on unsteady legs, drawn to the genetic connection they shared. What followed transcended scientific explanation. Bull lowered his massive head, allowing the calf to press its tiny muzzle against the white diamond marking that mirrored its own. The gesture was so deliberate, so gentle, that even Emma's scientific mindset seemed momentarily overridden by something more profound. "He's acknowledging his son," Martha said quietly. "Passing something on that can't be measured in genetic markers or bloodline percentages." Jack could only nod, words inadequate for the scene unfolding before them. In that quiet moment of connection between generations, he felt the presence of his father and grandfather, their work, their passion, their legacy continuing through this perfect calf with its distinctive marking. The Thompson-Sullivan bloodline hadn't ended with the flood. It hadn't been destroyed by Frank Weston's vindictive cruelty. Against all odds, it had survived in one extraordinary bull who had defied death repeatedly to reach this moment of renewal. As morning light strengthened across the preserve, illuminating the new veterinary center, the education facility, and the expanded paddocks where future generations would grow, Jack Thompson finally felt the weight of the past lifting. Bull had shown him that survival wasn't enough, that after surviving came rebuilding, renewal, and ultimately legacy. The white diamond marking, passed now from father to son, wasn't just a physical trait but a symbol of continuity, proof that what mattered most could endure through flood and fire, through cruelty and loss, through the darkest chapters life could write. As Bull finally turned away from the fence, satisfied that his offspring was strong and his bloodline secure, he caught Jack's gaze with that same intelligent awareness that had connected them through every trial. In that silent exchange lay understanding deeper than words, acknowledgment of all they had survived together and all that would continue because of their shared journey. The first chapter of their story had been about survival against impossible odds. This new chapter, beginning with a wobbly-legged calf bearing the distinctive white diamond marking, would be about building something worthy of that survival. And as Jack watched Bull return to his place beneath the oak tree, massive form moving with the dignity that no injury could diminish, he knew with bone-deep certainty that whatever challenges the future might hold, they would face them as they had faced everything else, together, bound by a connection that had somehow proven stronger than all the forces aligned against it, a connection that would now continue, generation after generation, in the Thompson-Sullivan bloodline that had refused to be erased from the world. 1 month later, Willow Creek Nature Preserve hummed with the sounds of construction and renewal. Workers raised the frame of the new veterinary center, its modern design blending seamlessly with the preserve's natural aesthetic. Funded by Michael Weston's compensation package, the facility would feature state-of-the-art medical equipment, expanded rehabilitation spaces, and specialized care areas for injured wildlife. At Jack's insistence, the central treatment room bore a simple plaque, Diamond Sovereign Wing, an acknowledgment of the bull whose story had transformed the preserve's fortunes. Jack stood on the observation deck of Bull's expanded paddock, watching the Brahman's deliberate movements in the early morning light. The massive animal had recovered remarkably from the blood clot episode, though his pace remained measured, his once fluid gait now permanently marked by a slight hitch. Doctor, Harrington had been clear about the prognosis. Bull would need ongoing medication and monitoring for the rest of his life, his activity levels carefully managed to prevent further complications. Yet despite these limitations, Bull had adapted with characteristic resilience. Each morning, he followed the same routine, walking the perimeter of his spacious enclosure, testing the air with flared nostrils, and eventually settling beneath the shade of the old oak that Jack had insisted on incorporating into the paddock's design. There, he would watch the preserve's activities with alert interest, his intelligent eyes tracking Jack's movements throughout the day. "Beautiful morning," Martha observed, joining Jack at the railing. At 79, her recent birthday celebrated with uncharacteristic fanfare by the preserve staff, she seemed energized rather than diminished by the past month's challenges. "Our boy's looking strong today." Jack nodded, unable to suppress a smile as Bull noticed their presence and altered his path, moving toward them with purposeful dignity. "Blood work came back normal yesterday. Emma says his medication levels are perfect." "Good thing, considering what's happening tomorrow," Martha replied, a hint of mischief in her weathered features. "You haven't told him yet, have you?" "Told him what?" Jack asked, though he suspected Martha was referring to the surprise he'd arranged, a surprise currently housed in the quarantine facility on the preserve's eastern boundary. Martha chuckled. "About his ladies, of course. 3 purebred Brahmin heifers with pedigrees that would make any rancher weep with envy." "You think he knows they're here?" Jack glanced at Bull, who had positioned himself directly below their observation point, massive head raised expectantly. "Something tells me he might suspect. He's been more alert than usual the past few days, testing the air every time the wind shifts from the east." "Breeding sense," Martha nodded approvingly. His grandfather, King's Command, could detect a heifer in season from 3 pastures away. Some traits run deep in the bloodline. The decision to acquire the heifers had been both practical and deeply personal. With Michael Weston's compensation providing financial security, Jack had revisited his childhood dream, rebuilding the Thompson bloodline from its sole surviving member. Bull might be in the twilight of his years, but with careful genetic management, his legacy could continue for generations. Emma had been cautiously supportive, emphasizing Bull's advanced age and health concerns while acknowledging the psychological benefits of companionship. Dr. Harrington had provided more enthusiastic endorsement, suggesting that limited supervised breeding activity might actually improve Bull's quality of life, giving him purpose beyond mere survival. "The board approved the final conservation breeding plan this morning," Jack told Martha. "Starting with these 3 heifers and expanding the program gradually. In 5 years, we could have a small herd of Thompson-Sullivan lineage cattle, living heritage animals preserving genetic traits that almost disappeared with the flood." Martha's eyes misted slightly. "Your father would be proud, Jack. So would my Herbert. They believed in preserving the old bloodlines when everyone else was chasing the latest trends." She watched Bull with undisguised affection. "And this old boy gets to be the patriarch he was born to be." Their conversation was interrupted by Emma's arrival, tablet in hand and professional demeanor firmly in place despite the excitement evident in her expression. "Morning vitals all normal," she reported. "Blood pressure stable, resting heart rate consistent with last week's readings. I'd say he's ready for tomorrow's introduction." Jack nodded, relief mingling with anticipation. After everything Bull had endured, Frank's abuse, the python attack, the medical crises, this moment of renewal felt like coming full circle. a chance to transform survival into legacy. The local news is sending a crew, Emma added. Robert's arranging controlled access. This is a significant conservation milestone, especially with Bull's public following. Indeed, Bull had become something of a celebrity in the months following Frank's arrest. The dramatic footage of his defense against the tiger had gone viral, attracting millions of views and spawning countless articles about animal intelligence, loyalty, and the bond between humans and livestock. Donations had poured in from around the country, many specifically designated for Bull's care and the preservation of his bloodline. Famous in his old age, Martha chuckled. If cattle could read fan mail, his head would be too big for that paddock. Below them, Bull rumbled impatiently, clearly sensing the importance of their conversation. Jack made his way down to the paddock entrance, the morning ritual of personal connection as essential to his own well-being as to Bull's. As he entered the enclosure, the massive animal approached with dignified restraint, waiting for Jack's greeting before lowering his head for the familiar touch. "Big day tomorrow, old friend," Jack said quietly, fingers finding the white diamond marking on Bull's forehead. "You're going to meet some ladies. Think you remember how to behave around the fairer sex?" Bull's response was a deep, resonant rumble that vibrated through Jack's arm. Despite his age and injuries, there remained something undeniably powerful in his presence, a quiet strength that had survived flood and abuse, python and tiger, medical crises and recovery. A strength that now had the chance to continue through generations yet unborn. As Jack conducted his morning inspection of Bull's condition, checking the healing wounds and observing his movement, Emma joined them with her medical kit. The once skittish veterinarian now moved confidently around Bull, her initial caution replaced by professional respect and genuine affection. "His coat looks better this week," she observed, running experienced hands along Bull's flank. "The new vitamin supplements are working, and the scar tissue along his ribs is softening. He's regaining some flexibility there." Jack nodded, noticing the improvement in Bull's breathing and movement. Though the massive animal would never fully recover from the crushing damage inflicted by the python, each small victory, each increment of comfort and capability regained, felt momentous. "The new heifers all passed their final health screenings," Emma continued, administering Bull's morning medications with practiced efficiency. "Genetically diverse enough to establish a viable foundation herd while maintaining the distinctive Thompson-Sullivan traits. The youngest one, Scarlet, has markings remarkably similar to what your father described in Duchess." Jack smiled, remembering the photographs in his father's stud book. Duchess as a young heifer, the distinctive coloration and conformation that had made her Martha's prize animal. Genetic memory is a powerful thing. "Speaking of memory," Emma said, her tone shifting slightly, "Davis stopped by this morning. The prosecution has scheduled Frank's sentencing hearing for next month. They're asking if you'll provide a victim impact statement." The mention of Frank Weston cast a momentary shadow over the bright morning. Though the former rancher remained in custody, his presence still loomed over Willow Creek, a dark chapter not yet fully closed. Jack had testified during the trial, recounting the python attack and the evidence of Frank's orchestration, but had avoided directly engaging with the man whose vendetta had nearly cost Bull his life. "I'll think about it," Jack replied, not wanting to dwell on Frank when tomorrow promised such a different kind of milestone. Today and tomorrow are about looking forward, not back. Emma seemed to understand, changing the subject as they completed Bull's morning examination. "The education center designs are finalized. Robert wants your approval before construction starts next week." The education center represented another dimension of Bull's legacy, a facility designed to share the story of the Thompson-Sullivan bloodline while educating visitors about heritage breeds, conservation breeding, and the human-animal bond. Interactive exhibits would trace Bull's remarkable journey from the original Thompson farm through flood, separation, and eventual reunion, emphasizing the resilience of both animal and human spirit. As Emma departed to check on the quarantined heifers, Jack remained with Bull, settling beside him beneath the oak tree's spreading branches. The massive animal eased himself down with the careful movements of age and injury, positioning his bulk so that his shoulder rested lightly against Jack's arm, a gesture of connection that had become their shared habit during recovery. "Never thought we'd end up here, did you?" Jack said quietly, gazing across the preserve's revitalized landscape. "And when Dad first put you in my hands as a calf, the world looked so different." Bull rumbled softly in response, his dark eyes tracking a red-tailed hawk circling above the paddock. Despite advanced age and the traumas he'd endured, the spark of intelligence in those eyes remained undimmed, a witness to history, a bearer of memory, a bridge between past and future. Martha approached with a basket of fresh apples, Bull's favorite treat now that his appetite had fully returned. "Thought our patriarch might like a little something special before his big day tomorrow." Jack accepted the basket with a grateful smile. "You spoil him worse than your grandchildren." "He's earned it," Martha replied simply, settling on Bull's other side. She offered a perfectly quartered apple, which the massive animal accepted with surprising delicacy from her weathered palm. 23 years old and still teaching us youngsters a thing or two about determination? They sat in companionable silence as late morning drifted toward noon, the preserve humming with activity around them. Visitors gathered at the observation platform, camera phones capturing images of the now famous bull resting peacefully between his human guardians. Tour guides recounted his remarkable story, emphasizing the preserve's conservation mission and the importance of heritage genetics. Robert joined them briefly, bringing architectural renderings of the completed veterinary center and education facility for final approval. The once anxious administrator had blossomed in the wake of the preserve's newfound stability, his natural organizational talents channeled into positive growth rather than crisis management. "Donations continue to exceed projections," he reported happily. "The Adopt a Bull program for the future calves already has a waiting list." And 3 universities have requested research partnerships focused on heritage breed conservation. Jack reviewed the plans with satisfaction, noting the thoughtful integration of modern facilities with the preserve's natural environment. "My grandfather used to say that good stewardship means planning for those who'll come long after you're gone. Looks like we're on the right track." As Robert departed, Martha checked her watch and rose with a groan that betrayed her arthritis. "Almost time for my volunteer orientation session. Got 15 new helpers starting today, most of them retirees looking for purpose." She patted Bull's massive shoulder. "You behave yourself. Big day tomorrow." Left alone with Bull in the quieting midday heat, Jack found himself reflecting on the journey that had brought them to this moment. 5 years since the flood that had claimed his family and farm. 3 years since discovering Bull at Frank's ranch, abused but unbroken. Months of healing from the python attack and its complications. Each chapter marked by loss and struggle, yet each ultimately leading toward renewal. Tomorrow's introduction of the heifers represented more than a breeding program or conservation effort. It symbolized continuation, the promise that something valuable would persist beyond individual lifetimes. The Thompson-Sullivan bloodline wouldn't end with Bull. It would flow forward into future generations, carrying with it the resilience, intelligence, and loyalty that had defined its most remarkable representative. As afternoon shadows lengthened, Jack reluctantly prepared to leave Bull for his scheduled meeting with the County Conservation Board. The massive animal rose with him, accompanying him to the paddock gate with measured steps that betrayed only slightly the damage that remained from his ordeal. "I'll be back for evening check," Jack promised, giving Bull a final pat. Rest up for tomorrow. You've got ladies to impress. Bull watched him depart with characteristic attentiveness, massive head raised regally despite the silver that now dominated his once dark face. In the slanting afternoon light, he appeared less a wounded survivor and more the imposing patriarch he had been born to become, a living link between past and future, his bloodline's legacy secured not despite the trials he had endured, but because of the strength those trials had revealed. The community gathering that evening at the preserve's main pavilion carried the atmosphere of celebration rather than formal business. Board members mingled with volunteers, donors chatted with staff, and local ranchers who had initially viewed the preserve with skepticism now offered enthusiastic support for the heritage breeding program. Jack circulated through the crowd, accepting congratulations and fielding questions about tomorrow's heifer introduction. The passionate response still surprised him at times, the way Bull's story had resonated with people far beyond the ranching community, touching something fundamental about resilience, connection, and the endurance of memory. "There's our man of the hour," called a familiar voice as Dr. Harrington approached, champagne flute in hand. "Tomorrow's the big day. Our patient ready for his new companions?" Jack smiled, genuinely pleased to see the veterinary authority who had become both colleague and friend during Bull's recovery. "As ready as a 23-year-old bull can be. He's been restless all week, pretty sure he can smell them even from across the preserve." Dr. Harrington chuckled. "Breeding instinct is a powerful motivator, might be exactly what he needs. Purpose beyond just survival." He lowered his voice slightly. "Though I've been meaning to ask, have you given any thought to preservation collection?" Given his age and medical history, having genetic material stored would be a prudent backup. Jack nodded, having already discussed this option with Emma. Scheduled for next month, assuming tomorrow's introduction goes well and his health remains stable. "We're not taking any chances with this bloodline." "Wise decision," Dr. Harrington approved. "Future generations will thank you for preserving genetics that might otherwise have been lost forever." He raised his glass. "To Diamond Sovereign and the legacy he's about to establish." As conversations flowed around him, Jack found his thoughts returning to Bull, alone in his paddock beneath the star-filled Texas sky. Tomorrow would bring new beginnings, new connections, new possibilities. Yet even as they celebrated the future, Jack couldn't help reflecting on the remarkable journey that had brought them to this threshold, a journey defined by loss and reunion, by cruelty and kindness, by the unbreakable bond between a man and an animal who had saved each other in ways beyond measure. The following morning dawned clear and perfect, the kind of crystalline autumn day that showcased the preserve at its finest. Jack arrived before sunrise, wanting private time with Bull before the day's scheduled activities began. He found the massive animal already alert, standing at the eastern fence line where his paddock afforded the clearest view toward the quarantine facility. "You definitely know something's up," Jack observed, opening the gate with the special feed bucket that contained Bull's morning medications hidden within his favorite treats. "Been planning this a long time, old friend." Bull accepted his breakfast with unusual distraction, dark eyes repeatedly drifting toward the eastern horizon where the first golden light was beginning to appear. His nostrils flared periodically, testing the air with focused intensity. Emma arrived as Jack was completing Bull's morning health check, her medical kit supplemented today with specialized monitoring equipment. "Vitals are all stable," she reported after her examination. "Blood pressure slightly elevated, but that's expected given his awareness of the females. He's in optimal condition for the introduction." By mid-morning, the preserve hummed with controlled excitement. Staff positioned cameras to document the historic meeting, researchers prepared to record behavioral observations, and a select group of donors and supporters gathered at the specially constructed viewing area. Martha had arrived early, dressed in her finest Western wear, her weathered face alight with anticipation. "Never thought I'd see this day," she confided to Jack as final preparations were completed. "A continuation of both our family legacies. Herbert and your father would be beside themselves." Dr. Harrington oversaw the final arrangements, ensuring that the introduction would proceed with minimal stress to all animals involved. The three heifers had been carefully selected not just for genetic compatibility, but for temperament as well. Calm, intelligent animals that would complement Bull's dignified nature. "We'll bring them in one at a time," he explained to the gathered observers. "Starting with the oldest, Bella, who's already demonstrated the most stable temperament during quarantine." This controlled introduction minimizes stress and allows us to monitor Bull's reaction to each animal individually. Jack positioned himself inside the paddock with Bull, providing the reassuring presence that had guided the massive animal through so many challenges. Though protocols typically called for all humans to remain outside during such introductions, Dr. Harrington had agreed that Bull's unique bond with Jack warranted an exception. "Ready?" Jack asked quietly, standing beside the massive silver bull who had gone completely still, attention fixed on the paddock's eastern gate. Bull's response was a low, resonant rumble, not the warning sound he had issued during threats, but something deeper, more primal. Recognition, perhaps, of a moment's significance beyond human understanding. At Dr. Harrington's signal, the first gate opened. Bella, a magnificent 6-year-old Brahman heifer with a sleek, silver-gray coat remarkably similar to Bull's in his prime, stepped cautiously into the introduction area. She paused, testing the air, intelligent eyes scanning her new surroundings before settling on Bull's imposing figure. The collective breath of every observer seemed to hold as Bull straightened to his full height, massive head raised regally despite the silver that now dominated his once dark face. For a moment he appeared not as the wounded survivor of python and tiger, not as the aging bull with permanent injuries, but as the champion his bloodline had destined him to become, diamond sovereign in all his glory. His response to Bella was a gentle, rumbling greeting that vibrated through the morning air. The heifer's ears flicked forward with interest, her initial caution visibly easing as she registered Bull's non-threatening demeanor. With delicate steps that belied her substantial size, she moved further into the paddock. Jack stepped back, giving the animal space while remaining close enough to intervene if necessary. The connection unfolding before him transcended the clinical breeding program they had planned. This was continuation in its most fundamental form, the passing of genetic heritage from one generation to the next. As Bella approached, Bull lowered his massive head in greeting, offering the gentle forehead touch that constituted proper introduction in bovine social structure. The heifer responded in kind, their breath mingling in the space between them, scent and presence exchanged in the timeless ritual of their species. Around the paddock, cameras clicked and researchers made notes, but Jack barely registered the human activity. His focus remained entirely on Bull, on the dignity with which the aging patriarch greeted his potential mate, on the subtle communication passing between animals whose genetic heritage stretched back through generations of careful selection. "Perfect," Dr. Harrington murmured from the fence line. "Exactly the calm introduction we hoped for." Over the next hour, the remaining heifers were introduced one by one. Ruby, a deep red 5-year-old with the distinctive Thompson ear marking, and finally Scarlet, the youngest at 4 years, whose markings indeed echoed the long-ago Duchess from Martha's original herd. Each introduction proceeded with the same dignified exchange, each heifer accepted into Bull's space with gentle rumbles and careful movements. By early afternoon, all 3 heifers moved comfortably through the expanded paddock, grazing and exploring while Bull watched over them with evident satisfaction. His posture had transformed, the lingering effects of injury seemingly diminished by his new role as herd patriarch. "Would you look at that?" Martha said softly, wiping unashamed tears from her weathered cheeks. Standing guard over his ladies just like his grandfather used to do. Some things are bred so deep they can't be lost. As the formal observation period concluded and the crowd began to disperse, Jack remained in the paddock, settling beneath the oak tree to watch Bull adjust to his new companions. The massive animal divided his attention between monitoring the heifers and checking periodically on Jack's location, maintaining connection with both his new herd and the human who had become his constant through flood and separation, abuse and healing. Emma joined Jack briefly, her clinical assessment softened by evident emotion. His vitals have actually improved since the introduction. Heart rate more regular, breathing deeper. It's as if having a purpose beyond survival has strengthened him physically. He was always meant for this, Jack replied simply. Not just surviving, but continuing something valuable, something worth fighting for. As dusk approached, painting the preserve in gold and amber, Jack prepared to leave Bull with his new companions for their first night together. The massive animal accompanied him to the gate as always, but with a new alertness, a divided attention that spoke of responsibilities beyond their singular bond. "You've got a job now, old friend," Jack said quietly, giving Bull a final pat. "Taking care of these ladies, passing on everything that makes you who you are." He smiled, emotion tightening his throat. "Just like you took care of me." Bull rumbled in response, massive head pressing briefly against Jack's shoulder, a gesture of connection that had sustained them both through the darkest chapters of their shared journey. Then, with a dignity that belied his age and injuries, he turned back toward his heifers, assuming the protective position that came instinctively to his bloodline. From the observation deck, Martha watched with knowing eyes as Jack exited the paddock. "Some endings aren't really endings at all," she observed as he joined her. "Sometimes they're just the beginning of something new." Jack nodded, unable to speak past the emotion constricting his throat. Below them, Bull had gathered his small herd beneath the oak tree as evening settled over the preserve. The four Brahmins formed a perfect tableau against the sunset, not just animals in a paddock, but living heritage, a bloodline preserved against impossible odds. "Your father told me once that Diamond Sovereign was special from the day he was born," Martha continued, her weathered hand finding Jack's arm. "Said he had old eyes like he was carrying memories from generations before." Turns out he was right. He remembered everything, Jack agreed quietly. The farm, the flood, our connection. Even after years of separation and abuse, he never forgot who he was. "And now that memory lives on," Martha said, gesturing toward the peaceful scene below. "In the calves that will come, in the bloodline that continues, in the stories we tell about a bull who survived the unsurvivable and built something new from what remained." As darkness settled fully over Willow Creek, stars emerging in the clear autumn sky, Jack lingered on the observation deck long after Martha had departed. Below him, Bull maintained his vigilant watch over his sleeping heifers, massive silhouette visible in the moonlight. Not just a survivor now, but a creator, a connector between past and future. In that quiet moment, Jack felt the weight of the past few months, the terror of the python attack, the struggle for Bull's survival, the fight against Frank's machinations, begin to lift slightly from his shoulders. The legacy his father and grandfather had built, the bloodline they had nurtured through generations, wouldn't end with the flood that had claimed their farm. It would continue through Bull, through the calves to come, through the stories that would be told of their remarkable journey. Some bonds, Jack reflected as he finally turned toward home, transcend understanding, surpassing time and distance, surviving flood and fire, outlasting cruelty and loss. Some connections run deeper than blood or DNA, deeper than scientific explanation or rational understanding. Bull had remembered who he was despite everything fate had thrown against him. In doing so, he had helped Jack remember too. Not just who he had been before the flood, but who he could still become. Together they had transformed survival into renewal, preserving a legacy that would now flow forward into generations yet unborn. Not an ending, as Martha had said so wisely, but a beginning built on memory, sustained by connection, reaching toward a future where the strongest bonds endure against all odds. In the story of Jack and Bull, we find what many of us search for in our golden years, proof that our lives matter beyond our own time. Like Bull, who at 23 found new purpose as a patriarch passing on his legacy, we too can discover that our most meaningful chapters may still lie ahead. Remember how Bull stood tall despite his scars, how he protected those he loved without hesitation, how he remembered his true identity even when the world tried to make him forget. That's the resilience we've cultivated through decades of living. When Jack opened that paddock gate, introducing Bull to a future he never thought possible, wasn't that the second chance we all hope for? She is a moment when our experience, our wisdom, our very DNA becomes a gift to the next generation. This story reminds us that our lives aren't defined by what we've lost, but by what we choose to preserve and pass on. What legacy are you building in your life right now? Has there been a moment when, like Bull, you found unexpected purpose just when you thought your story was ending? Share your journey in the comments. Your wisdom might be exactly what someone else needs to hear today.